The weak were born to serve the strong. That was the lesson every wolf in the Silverpine pack had forced upon Elone from the moment of her first shift. Yet on the coldest night anyone could remember, when she dragged 15 half-frozen wolves across her threshold, she was about to discover that mercy could be rarer and far more dangerous than power. Chapter 1. The Omega's Burden. The wind shrieked like a wounded beast. Elone leaned her full weight against the cabin door as the blizzard hammered the wooden frame, trying to force its way inside. Snow had already climbed halfway up the windows, trapping her little home beneath a rising wall of white. Frost spread across the glass in delicate patterns that might have looked beautiful under any other circumstances. Tonight, they looked like a warning of death. She should have been sheltering at the pack house. 3 days earlier, when the forecast warned of the worst winter storm in recorded history, Alpha Donovan had ordered every wolf in Silverpine territory to gather there. Together, they would have generators, shared warmth, and safety in numbers. But Elone had never truly been considered one of them. She was an Omega, the lowest rank, the weakest member of the hierarchy. She had no strength for battle, no authority to lead, and none of the ordinary skills that might have made her useful on hunts or patrols. Her wolf was undersized, her human appearance easily overlooked, and the pack tolerated her only because werewolf law forbade them from abandoning one of their own. Barely. "Don't bother coming to the pack house," Beta Thomas had told her when she approached the others. His mouth twisted with disgust as his eyes swept over her. "We don't have room for useless weight. The generators are for wolves who actually contribute. You'll only waste supplies." His mate, Catherine, had laughed, the bright sound cutting more deeply than a growl. "Honestly, Elone, you'll probably be warmer in your little cabin. One less body means more heat for the rest of us. Stay where you belong." Where she belonged. Alone, as always. So Elone had prepared with the little she possessed. Several cans of food, a few candles, and a stack of firewood she had spent months gathering and chopping because no one else would help her. Her wolf whimpered inside her, more like a frightened stray than a predator. Neither of them had been made for harsh survival, but they would do their best. The storm had raged for 2 days. Half the firewood was already gone, burned just to keep the cabin from freezing. Elone had wrapped herself in every blanket she owned and pulled on 3 pairs of socks, yet her fingers remained numb. The wind slipped through every crack in the walls. The cabin had originally been built for storage, not for living, but it was the only shelter the pack had given her. "It's better than nothing," they always said. "You should be grateful." And Elone tried to be. She truly did. She stirred a thin soup over the wood stove, mostly hot water, a few vegetables, and one precious handful of rice. Her supplies had to last. No one would come to check on her. No one would bring food if she ran out. If she froze to death, they would find her after the spring thaw and merely shrug. The Omega couldn't survive the cold, they would say. Weak wolf. At least she didn't consume any more of our resources. Her hand shook as she raised the spoon. The soup was only lukewarm, but it was still something. Warmth from the inside, just as her mother had once taught her, before illness took away the only person who had ever cared whether Elone lived or died. "You are stronger than they believe, little moon," her mother had whispered from her deathbed, cold fingers resting in Elone's hand. Being an Omega does not make you worthless. It means you notice what others overlook. You feel what others choose to ignore. That is a gift, my child. Never let them convince you otherwise. But gifts could not warm a frozen cabin. They could not fill an empty stomach or silence the cruel laughter that followed her through pack territory. Elone had just lowered her bowl when she heard something beneath the screaming wind. A faint, scratching sound. Weak. Desperate. Her wolf instantly became alert inside her chest. Something was beyond the door. Something living. She should not open it. Every second the door remained open would release precious heat. In a storm this violent, the wind might tear it from her grip, drive enough snow inside to bury her remaining supplies, or snuff out the fire completely. The scratching came again, weaker this time. Elowen's heart clenched. She knew that sound. She'd made that sound herself once, scratching at the pack house door after getting locked out during a prank the younger wolves had played. She'd stood in the cold for 3 hours before someone finally heard her. She remembered how it felt, the desperation, the fear, the certainty that you were going to die and no one cared enough to save you. Her hand was on the door handle before she made a conscious decision. Don't be stupid, she told herself. It's probably just debris, a branch, something blown by the wind. The scratching came again, and this time she heard it. A whimper, small, pained, animal. Wolf. Elowen wrenched open the door. The blizzard exploded into her cabin with the force of a physical blow. Snow blasted her face, blinding her instantly. Wind tore at her clothes, her hair, her breath. The cold was so intense it felt like fire, burning her exposed skin. But there, on her doorstep, half buried in a snowdrift, was a wolf, not a werewolf in human form. An actual wolf. Gray and white, medium-sized, its fur crusted with ice. Its amber eyes met hers with desperate intelligence before closing weakly. No, 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 Elowen gasped, dropping to her knees. The snow soaked through her pants instantly, so cold it ached. She grabbed the wolf under its front legs and pulled. Dead weight, heavier than she expected. Her omega strength barely sufficient for the task. She dragged the wolf over her threshold, grunting with effort. Her muscles screamed. Her wolf whimpered with the strain. But she got the animal inside. She turned to close the door, but something made her stop. Eyes, gleaming in the darkness beyond her doorway. Multiple pairs. Dozens. More wolves. They emerged from the white curtain of the blizzard like ghosts, gray, black, brown, white. All of them covered in ice. All of them stumbling, swaying, barely able to stand. They moved toward her cabin with the last dregs of their strength, drawn by the light, the warmth, the only hope in miles of frozen death. Elowen's breath caught in her throat. There were so many. Too many. At least a dozen. Maybe more. Her cabin was barely big enough for her. How could she possibly? One of the wolves collapsed in her doorway. A large black male, his tongue lolling, his breathing shallow. He didn't get back up. The decision made itself. Come on, Elowen called out, her voice barely audible over the wind. Inside. Now. Come on. She grabbed the black wolf and hauled him over the threshold with strength she didn't know she had. Adrenaline. Desperation. The same thing that let mothers lift cars off their children. She wasn't going to let them die. She couldn't. The wolves came. One by one, they stumbled through her door. She counted them as they entered, her heart pounding. 3, 5, 8, 11. They collapsed on her floor, on her bed, against her walls. Great heaps of frozen fur and ice. Some were smaller, some were massive. One brown male was easily twice her size, his paws as big as her hands. 14, 15 wolves packed into a cabin meant for one person. Elowen slammed the door shut and threw her weight against it, forcing it closed against the wind. The latch clicked, the howling became muffled, and suddenly her cabin was filled with the sound of labored breathing, of whimpers, of animals too cold to even shiver anymore. Okay, she whispered, looking around at the disaster she'd just invited in. Okay, think. Her fire was dying from the door being open. She rushed to it, throwing on more wood with shaking hands. The flames caught, grew, spread heat back into the space. But 15 wolves, how was she supposed to warm 15 wolves? Body heat. That was the answer. Pile them together. Let them share warmth. Elowen began moving the wolves, dragging the smaller ones toward the fire, pushing the larger ones into a cluster. They were so cold they barely reacted. Some of them watched her with glazed eyes. Others had their eyes closed entirely. One small gray female wasn't breathing right short, gasping breaths that made Elowen's chest tighten with fear. She worked for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. She arranged the wolves in a semicircle around her fire, layered them on top of each other like puzzle pieces, threw every blanket she owned over the pile. She heated water on her stove and dribbled it into their mouths when they'd open them. Most were too weak to drink, but a few managed a few laps. The large black male she'd dragged in first was the worst. His breathing was so shallow she had to put her hand on his chest to make sure his heart was still beating. His fur was frozen solid in places. Ice crystals embedded so deep she couldn't brush them out. "Stay with me," she whispered, rubbing his chest, his legs, trying to restore circulation. "Come on, big guy. Don't you dare die in my house. I didn't drag you in here just to watch you go." His eyes cracked open, gold, pure, metallic gold, the most unusual eye color she'd ever seen on a wolf. They focused on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. Then they closed again. Elowen kept working. She had no idea if she was doing the right thing. She'd never taken care of animals before. The pack had never let her near the kennels, said she'd probably hurt the hunting dogs with her incompetence. But these wolves needed her. For the first time in her life, something needed her, and she would be damned if she let them down. She fed the fire until her woodpile was half gone. She boiled snow for drinking water. She checked each wolf individually, rubbing their paws, their ears, looking for frostbite. Several had it blackened paw pads, frozen ear tips. She did what she could, warming the areas gently, praying she wasn't making it worse. The gray female with the labored breathing finally evened out, her chest rising and falling steadily. The brown giant started shivering, which was actually a good sign. Elowen remembered. Shivering meant the body was trying to warm itself, meant there was still fight left. One by one, the wolves began to stabilize. As dawn broke, though you couldn't tell through the blizzard, Elowen finally allowed herself to sit. She collapsed against the wall near the fire, her own body shaking with exhaustion. She hadn't slept in over 24 hours. Her clothes were soaked with melted snow. Her hands were raw and aching. Her food supplies were going to run out days faster with this many mouths to feed, and she didn't care, because they were alive, all 15 of them, breathing, warming, surviving. She'd done that. Weak, worthless, Omega Elowen had saved 15 lives. The black wolf with the gold eyes opened them again, and this time he kept them open. He stared at her for a long moment, something ancient and powerful swirling in those unusual irises, something that made her wolf sit up and take notice, made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. Then he closed his eyes and went back to sleep. Elowen smiled despite her exhaustion. "You're welcome," she whispered. She had no idea that the Omega had just saved the most powerful alpha in 5 kingdoms. She had no idea that her mercy would change everything. She had no idea that the storm outside was nothing compared to the one she'd just invited into her life. Chapter 2. The Alpha's Secret. The wolves began to stir as true morning arrived, or what passed for morning in the heart of the blizzard. The storm showed no signs of weakening. If anything, the wind had grown more vicious, battering Elowen's cabin with such force that the walls groaned in protest. She'd managed maybe an hour of sleep, dozing upright against the wall before her body's alarm system kicked in, reminding her that she had responsibilities now. 15 furry responsibilities that needed care. Elowen pushed herself to her feet, wincing as her muscles screamed. Everything hurt. Her shoulders ached from dragging wolves. Her hands were blistered from feeding the fire. Her head pounded from lack of proper sleep and food. She'd given her last decent meal to the wolves in the form of warm broth, dribbling it into their mouths throughout the night. But they were alive. That made it worth it. The small gray female was the first to fully wake. She lifted her head, ears swiveling, taking in her surroundings with obvious confusion. Her eyes, a soft brown, landed on Elowen, and for a moment, they just stared at each other. Then the wolf's tail thumped once against the floor. "Thank you," that tail thump said. "I understand what you did." Elowen felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "You're welcome," she whispered. The gray female struggled to her feet, shaky but determined. She limped over to Elowen. One of her back paws was badly frostbitten, and pressed her head against Elowen's leg. The gesture was so trusting, so grateful, that Elowen had to bite her lip to keep from crying. When was the last time anyone had touched her with kindness? She couldn't remember. Easy, Elowen murmured, running her hand over the wolf's head, checking her ears for frostbite. You're still recovering. Don't push yourself. The wolf huffed a sound almost like laughter and limped back to the pile of sleeping bodies. She settled herself against a large brown male, tucking her nose under her tail. One by one, the others began to wake. Some immediately went back to sleep, still exhausted from their ordeal. Others raised their heads, assessing, watching Elowen with varying degrees of wariness and curiosity. A few struggled to their feet, testing their legs, their strength. None of them tried to leave. Whether because of the storm still raging outside or something else. They seemed content to stay in her warm cabin, packed together like sardines. Elowen did a head count to make sure everyone was accounted for. 15. Still 15. All breathing. All alive. The black wolf with the gold eyes hadn't moved. He lay in the same position she'd left him in, his massive body still, his breathing deep and even. But something about him drew her attention. Maybe it was his size. He was the largest of the group, easily over 150 pounds of muscle and fur. Maybe it was those unusual eyes she'd glimpsed twice now. Or maybe it was the way the other wolves gave him space. Even in sleep, even piled together for warmth, there was a subtle circle of deference around him. The other wolves didn't quite touch him unless they had to. Elowen approached slowly, not wanting to startle him. Up close, she could see details she'd missed in her frantic rescue efforts. His fur wasn't just black, it had threads of silver running through it, like starlight woven into midnight. His paws were enormous, his claws thick and sharp even in their current frozen state. There was a scar across his muzzle, old and faded. The mark of a fight survived. This was not a wolf used to losing. She reached out hesitantly, placing her hand on his chest to check his heartbeat. Strong, steady, slow like a drum in the deep. His eyes snapped open. Gold. Pure metallic gold, even more striking in the gray morning light. They fixed on her face with an intensity that made her freeze, made her wolf drop into an instinctive submissive posture inside her chest. This was not just a wolf. This was an apex predator, a king among beasts. And she'd just touched him without permission. I'm sorry, Elowen breathed, starting to pull her hand back. I was just checking. He moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. His head came up, his teeth flashing, and for one heart-stopping moment, Elowen thought he was going to bite her. Instead, he pressed his cold nose against her palm. The gesture was so gentle, so deliberately non-threatening, that Elowen's fear evaporated. He held her gaze as he did it. Those gold eyes boring into hers with something that felt almost like communication. I know what you did. I see you. I won't hurt you. Then he laid his head back down and closed his eyes, dismissing her. Elowen let out a shaky breath. Her hand was trembling when she pulled it back. What was that? What was he? Just a wolf, she told herself firmly. A very big, very intimidating wolf, but just a wolf. Her inner Omega didn't believe that for a second. The day passed in a strange domestic rhythm. Elowen melted snow for water, a constant task, since 15 wolves drank an enormous amount. She rationed out her food supplies, doing mental math that made her stomach clench. At this rate, she had maybe 3 days of food left. 4, if she stopped eating entirely and gave everything to the wolves. She'd worry about that later. Right now, they needed her. The wolves seemed content to rest, conserve energy, let their bodies recover from near death. A few of them ventured to the door when nature called, and Elowen learned to time the openings perfectly. Door open just long enough for a wolf to slip out and back in, minimizing heat loss. The storm made even that dangerous. More than one wolf returned with fresh snow crusted to their fur, shivering all over again. The brown giant she'd noticed last night finally woke fully around midday. He struggled to his feet with a groan that sounded remarkably human, shook himself, sending water droplets flying, and fixed Elowen with pale blue eyes that held surprising intelligence. He padded over to her, movements still stiff, and did something that shocked her. He bowed, actually bowed, lowering his front legs and dipping his massive head in a gesture of unmistakable respect. Oh, Elowen breathed. No, You don't need to. He huffed and head-butted her leg gently, then returned to the pile of wolves. But before he settled, he positioned himself between her and the door, guarding, protecting. Eowyn felt her eyes burn with tears she refused to shed. These wolves, these wild animals, were showing her more respect and gratitude than her own pack had in 23 years. By late afternoon, the cabin had settled into an almost comfortable warmth. 15 wolves generated a lot of body heat when clustered together. Eowyn had stopped feeding the fire as aggressively, letting it burn lower to conserve her dwindling wood supply. She was checking the frostbite on a young tangent-colored wolf's ears when she felt it. A shift in the air, a change in pressure. Like the moment before lightning strikes, every wolf in the cabin raised their heads simultaneously, ears perked, attention fixed on the black wolf with gold eyes. He was waking up. Really waking up this time. He rose to his feet in one fluid motion, no stiffness, no hesitation. The picture of predatory grace. And as he stood to his full height, Eowyn realized she'd underestimated his size. He wasn't just large, he was massive. His shoulder came up to her waist. His head would reach her chest if he stood on his hind legs. And every single wolf in the cabin dropped into a submissive posture, heads down, ears back, tails tucked. Even the brown giant who'd bowed to her earlier was practically pressing his belly to the floor. Eowyn's breath caught. Oh no. This wasn't just a wolf. This was an alpha. A real alpha. The kind that commanded instant obedience, whose dominance was so powerful it radiated like heat from a forge, and she'd dragged him into her cabin like a sack of potatoes. The black wolf, the alpha, turned those gold eyes on her. He stared for a long moment, his gaze roving over her face, her body, the cabin around them, the other wolves. Assessing, calculating, understanding. Then he walked toward her. Eowyn's wolf screamed at her to submit, to lower her eyes, to show her belly, to acknowledge his superiority. Every instinct bred into her over millennia of wolf hierarchy demanded she prostrate herself before this creature. But she'd saved his life. She'd saved all their lives, and damn it, this was her cabin. So Eowyn stood her ground. "You're awake," she said, proud that her voice only shook a little. "That's good. You were in bad shape last night. How do you feel?" The alpha stopped directly in front of her. So close she could feel the heat coming off his body, could smell the wild scent of him, pine and snow, and something else. Something that made her wolf whimper with confused longing. He tilted his head, studying her with an expression that was far too human for a wolf's face. Then he did something that made her heart stop. He shifted. The transformation was instantaneous. One moment, a massive black wolf. The next, a naked man kneeling on her cabin floor. And not just any man. He was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Tall at least 6.5 feet, broad-shouldered and heavily muscled like a warrior. His skin was tan, his hair black as midnight and just as wild, falling past his shoulders. And his eyes, those impossible gold eyes, were even more striking in a human face. But it was the power rolling off him that made Eowyn's knees weak. This was dominance incarnated. This was an alpha, in the truest, most primal sense. This was a king. "You," he said, his voice deep and rough from disuse, "are either the bravest Omega I've ever met, or the most foolish." Behind him, the other wolves began to shift too. One by one, naked men and women appeared where wolves had been. All of them averting their eyes from the black-haired man. All of them radiating submission. Werewolves. They were all werewolves. And Eowyn had just let 15 strange werewolves into her home. She started, but her voice failed her. The man rose to his full height, towering over her. He took a step closer, and Eowyn's back hit the wall. She was trapped between wood and alpha. Between safety and a predator who could kill her with one hand. "What's your name?" he asked softly, dangerously. "Eowyn," she whispered. "Eowyn Thornheart. Of the Silver Pine Pack." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, then something darker. "Silver Pine," he repeated slowly. "Alpha Donovan's territory." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "And where is your pack, little Omega? Why are you alone in this storm? The question was casual. The tone was not. There was steel beneath silk, threat beneath courtesy. Eowyn lifted her chin, drawing on reserves of courage she didn't know she possessed. They didn't want me at the pack house. Said I'd be a drain on resources. So I stayed here. Silence, heavy and suffocating. Then, they left you to die. It wasn't a question. I'm used to it, Eowyn said, and hated how small her voice sounded. The Alpha's eyes flashed with something that might have been rage. His jaw clenched. The other werewolves in the cabin shifted nervously, feeling their leader's anger like a physical force. You saved us, he said finally. 15 werewolves at great risk to yourself. You shared your food, your fire, your shelter. You asked for nothing in return. You needed help, Eowyn said simply. I couldn't let you die. Even knowing what we were? Even knowing the danger? I didn't know what you were until 30 seconds ago, she admitted. I just knew you were freezing. The Alpha stared at her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he smiled. It was small, barely a curve of his lips, but it transformed his face from terrifying to devastating. My name, he said, is Chaol Stormborn. Alpha King of the Northern Territories, Lord of the 5 Kingdoms, Commander of the Royal Guard. Eowyn's heart stopped. Alpha King. The Alpha King. The most powerful werewolf in the known world. The ruler of territories that spanned thousands of miles. The wolf that other alphas bowed to. She dragged the Alpha King across her threshold and made him drink broth from a chipped bowl. Oh, goddess, she breathed. Oh, goddess, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I never would have. Never would have what? Chaol interrupted gently. Saved my life? Saved the lives of my royal guard? He gestured to the other werewolves, who were watching the exchange with expressions ranging from awe to amusement, because that's what you did. Eowyn Thornheart, you saved the king and his most trusted warriors, without hesitation, without expectation of reward. I just did what anyone would do, she stammered. No. His voice was firm. You did what almost no one would do. You showed mercy to strangers, compassion to creatures who could have torn you apart. Selflessness, when you had every reason to be selfish. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, giving her every chance to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face with one large hand. His palm was warm, calloused, gentle. You are no Omega, Eowyn Thornheart, he said quietly. You are a queen who doesn't know her own worth. Eowyn's world tilted, and outside, the storm began to scream. Chapter 3. The King's Decree. Eowyn couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The Alpha King's hand on her face felt like a brand, marking her, claiming her in some way she didn't understand. His gold eyes held hers with an intensity that made her wolf roll over in complete submission, but also something else. Something that felt like recognition. Your Majesty. One of the other werewolves spoke up, a woman with auburn hair and sharp green eyes. We need to assess our situation. The storm. Our location. Communication with the capital. Chaol's hand dropped from Eowyn's face, and she immediately felt the loss of his warmth. He turned to address his guard, and the shift in his demeanor was instantaneous. Gone was the gentle male who'd called her a queen. In his place stood a commander, a ruler, every inch of him radiating authority. Report Valencia, he ordered. The auburn-haired woman Valencia straightened. Like all of them, she was naked, but she wore her nudity with the casual confidence of a warrior who'd shifted 1,000 times. We were 3 hours into our patrol of the northern border when the storm hit. Visibility dropped to 0 within minutes. We tried to make it back to the forward outpost, but the temperature fell so fast that several of our wolves began showing signs of hypothermia. I ordered us to find shelter, the brown giant added. He had a deep, rumbling voice that matched his size. We tracked a smoke scent, her fire, but by the time we reached the cabin, we were all past the point of shifting back. The cold had locked us in wolf form. Chaol nodded grimly. If we'd tried to shift, we would have died instantly. Human form has no defense against that kind of cold. His gaze flicked to Eowyn. You saved us from a choice between freezing as wolves or dying as humans. I didn't know you had a choice, Elowen admitted. I just saw wolves who needed help. Which brings us to our current predicament, Valencia said, her tone all business. We're stranded in Omega territory, no offense, she added quickly, glancing at Elowen. None taken, Elowen murmured. She was used to worse. We have no way to contact the capital. The storm has knocked out all communications. No one knows where we are, and once the storm clears, we'll be at least 2 days' travel from the nearest royal outpost. Valencia crossed her arms. And we're completely dependent on the hospitality of a lone Omega who has every reason to hate alphas. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Kale's expression darkened. Explain. Valencia hesitated, glancing at Elowen uncertainly. Your Majesty, perhaps we should discuss this. Explain, Kale repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble that made every wolf in the cabin flinch. Why would Elowen have reason to hate alphas? Because we treat Omegas like garbage, a younger male spoke up. He had sandy, blonde hair and blue eyes that held genuine remorse. The hierarchy system. Omegas are at the bottom. They get the worst jobs, the worst housing, the worst treatment, and their own packs. He stopped, looking at Elowen with something like pity. Their own packs abandon them first when resources are scarce, like leaving them to die in a blizzard. The small gray female added quietly. She'd shifted into a petite woman with silver blonde hair and those same soft brown eyes. While the rest of the pack shelters together in warmth and safety. Kale's jaw clenched so hard Elowen heard his teeth grind. Is this true? He turned to her, those gold eyes blazing. Did Alpha Donovan knowingly leave you to die? Elowen wanted to lie, wanted to make excuses, wanted to protect her Alpha because that's what Omegas did. They protected the pack, even when the pack didn't protect them. But she was so tired of lying. Yes, she said simply. Beta Thomas told me not to come to the pack house, said I'd be a waste of resources. I'm only alive right now because I'm too stubborn to die when I'm told to. The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop despite the fire. Kale's power filled the space like a living thing, pressing against Elowen's skin, making her wolf cower. But it wasn't directed at her. It was rage, pure and primal, held under iron control. I see, he said softly, too softly. And how long have you been Omega, Elowen? Since I first shifted, 14 years. 14 years of this treatment, she nodded. 14 years of being treated as less than, as disposable, as unworthy. Each word was precise, clipped, and yet, when you found 15 dying wolves on your doorstep, wolves, who could have been from the pack that abandoned you, who could have been alphas coming to mock you, you saved us anyway. They needed help, Elowen repeated. Because what else could she say? It was the truth. The only truth that mattered. Kale stared at her for a long moment, then he turned to his guard. Clothes. Now. We're not having this conversation naked. That broke some of the tension. Several of the wolves actually smiled, and the blonde male who Elowen was starting to realize was younger than the others. Maybe early 20s laughed outright. Your Majesty, in case you haven't noticed, we lost everything in the storm, Valencia pointed out dryly. Unless our host has 15 sets of spare clothes lying around, we're out of luck. All eyes turned to Elowen. She felt her face heat. I have some clothes. They won't fit most of you, but... She moved to her tiny closet, painfully aware of how shabby her possessions must look to royalty. She pulled out everything she had, a few oversized shirts her mother had left behind, some threadbare blankets that could work as wraps, a pair of men's work pants she'd found at a second-hand market. It wasn't much. It wasn't nearly enough. I'm sorry, she said quietly. This is all I have. The small gray female, now a petite blonde, approached gently. May I? She gestured to a blanket. Elowen nodded, and watched as the woman expertly wrapped it around herself, toga style, securing it with a knot at her shoulder. My name is Lyra, she said with a warm smile, and this is perfect. Thank you. The others followed suit, making do with what little Elowen could offer. The men ended up with blankets around their waists like kilts. The women created various wrap dresses. Only Kyle refused the offered clothing. standing in the center of the cabin in all his naked glory like some ancient god of war. "Your Majesty," Valencia said pointedly. "Clothes." "I'm fine," Cale replied, his attention still fixed on Elowen. "I want to discuss something more important than modesty." "Oh, this should be good," the brown giant muttered. He'd introduced himself as Garrett, captain of the Royal Guard. "I know that tone. That's your I'm about to do something crazy tone." "It's not crazy," Cale said mildly. "It's justice." He moved toward Elowen again, and she fought the urge to back away. He stopped just within arm's reach, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact, close enough that his power washed over her like waves. "Elowen Thornhart," he said formally, "you saved my life. You saved the lives of my 15 royal guards. By the old laws, by the ancient codes that govern our kind, this creates a life debt. Do you know what that means?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice. "It means I owe you a boon, anything within my power to grant. Wealth, land, title, protection, name it, and it's yours." Elowen's mind went blank. Anything at all? She could ask for money, enough to leave Silverpine, to start over somewhere far away where no one knew she was Omega. She could ask for a home, a real home with strong walls and a proper bed. She could ask for, "I don't want anything," she heard herself say. Cale's eyebrows rose. "Nothing? You don't owe me anything. I just did what was right." "Which is precisely why you deserve to be rewarded," he countered. "Elowen, be reasonable. You have nothing. Your pack has cast you out in all but name. You're surviving on scraps in a cabin that's barely standing. Let me help you." Something in his tone, not pity, but something close to it, made her spine stiffen. "I'm fine." "You're starving," he said bluntly. "I can see your ribs." "When did you last have a full meal?" Elowen's face burned with shame. "That's none of your—" "3 days ago," Lyra interrupted softly. "I can smell it on her. She hasn't eaten properly in at least 3 days. And her food stores." She glanced at the nearly empty shelf. "She has maybe enough for 2 more days, and she was going to give it all to us. Wasn't she?" The silence was damning. "Elowen," Cale said, and his voice had gone gentle again. Dangerously gentle. "Tell me the truth. If we stay here until the storm ends, will you have enough food for yourself?" She wanted to lie. Goddess, how she wanted to lie. "No," she whispered, "but I'll manage. I always do." "Unacceptable." The word was flat, final. Cale turned to his guard. "Inventory. What do we have that could help?" "Nothing," Garrett admitted. "We were traveling light for the patrol. No supplies beyond what we carried in wolf form, and we lost everything in the storm. Then we hunt," Cale decided. "Storm or no storm, there has to be game out there. You can't." Elowen interrupted. "The storm is too severe. You'll die if you go out there for more than a few minutes. I've been watching it. Nothing could survive out there, which means any game that was nearby is either dead or sheltered so deep you'd never find it." Cale's frustration was palpable. "Then what do you suggest? We all sit here and watch you starve to feed us?" "I suggest you stop worrying about me," Elowen said, lifting her chin. "I'm not your responsibility. I'm not anyone's responsibility. I've been taking care of myself for a long time, and I'll keep doing it." "You shouldn't have to," Lyra said quietly. "No one should have to survive alone like this." "Well, that's what Omegas do," Elowen replied, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "We survive in the cracks, in the spaces no one else wants. We make do, we endure, and we definitely don't expect Alpha Kings to solve our problems." The words came out harsher than she intended, and she immediately regretted them. These wolves had been nothing but kind to her, well, as kind as naked strangers could be. They didn't deserve her anger, but Cale didn't look offended. If anything, he looked thoughtful. "You're right," he said finally. "You've been surviving alone, enduring abuse that should never have been tolerated, treated as lesser by wolves who should have protected you." He paused. "But that ends now." "What?" "You saved the Alpha King's life," Cale said, his voice taking on a formal quality that made everyone in the cabin stand straighter. By ancient law that grants you the right to petition me for justice. So, I'm asking you formally, Elowen Thornhart, do you wish to bring charges against Alpha Donovan and the Silverpine Pack for abandonment and abuse of a pack member? Elowen's heart stopped. I what? No, I can't. That's not— You can, Kale interrupted. And I'm telling you that you should. Because what they did to you is not just cruel, it's illegal. Pack law requires alphas to care for all members, including omegas, especially omegas. Abandoning you to die in a storm is grounds for removal from power. He'll kill me, Elowen whispered. If I bring charges, if he finds out I survived and told you what happened, he'll kill me. No, Kale said, and there was something absolutely lethal in his voice. He won't, because you're under my protection now. Any wolf who touches you will answer to me. And I promise you, little Omega, they will not enjoy that conversation. Elowen looked around the cabin at the 15 royal guards, all of whom were nodding in agreement. These were the most powerful wolves in the kingdom, and they were on her side. It was terrifying. It was overwhelming. It was everything she'd never dared to hope for. I need to think, she managed. This is all too much. Too fast. I can't. A massive crack split the air, loud as thunder. Everyone froze. The roof, Garrett said grimly. The weight of the snow. It's going to collapse. And as if his words had summoned it, the ceiling began to groan. Don't forget to subscribe. Chapter 4. Shelter in the Storm. The cabin exploded into motion. Everyone out! Kale roared, his command voice brooking no argument. Now! But Elowen stood frozen, staring up at the ceiling as it bowed inward, snow pressing down with thousands of pounds of crushing weight. Her home. Her only shelter. Everything she owned was in this cabin, her mother's few belongings, her sparse supplies, the memories of every cold night she'd survived alone. Elowen! Strong hands grabbed her waist, lifting her bodily off the floor. Kale. He had her pressed against his chest, moving toward the door even as another crack split the air. Move, damn it. The world became chaos. Wolves scrambled for the exit, grabbing what supplies they could. Valencia snatched up Elowen's blankets. Lyra grabbed the food stores. Garrett was literally holding the doorframe, his massive body braced against it to keep it open as wolves poured through. The ceiling groaned again, a sound like a dying beast. Kale hit the doorway at a run, Elowen still clutched in his arms. The blizzard outside was a wall of white death, wind so strong it nearly knocked them backwards. The cold hit like a physical blow, stealing breath, burning exposed skin. The trees! Valencia shouted over the wind, pointing toward a line of forest barely visible through the snow. We need cover. They ran. 15 werewolves and 1 omega, fleeing into a storm that wanted them dead. Elowen buried her face against Kale's chest, her thin shirt no protection against the cold. His body heat was the only thing keeping her from freezing instantly, his arms like steel bands around her. Behind them, the cabin collapsed with a sound like the world ending. Elowen felt the vibration through Kale's chest, heard the crash of wood and stone and snow. 14 years of her life, gone in an instant. The only place she'd ever called home, destroyed. Don't look back, Kale commanded, his voice rough against her ear. Keep moving. We're not dying today. The forest rose up before them like salvation, massive pines with branches heavy with snow, creating pockets of relative shelter beneath their boughs. The guard didn't hesitate, diving into the tree line, seeking any protection from the lethal wind. Garrett found it first. Here, a hollow. They converged on his position, a depression in the ground where several fallen trees had created a natural shelter, their trunks forming walls and their branches overhead providing a crude roof. It wasn't much. It was barely anything. But it was better than the open storm. The wolves piled in, pressing together for warmth. Kale set Elowen down carefully in the center of the hollow, immediately positioning himself between her and the worst of the wind. The others formed a circle around them, creating a living windbreak with their bodies. Everyone accounted for? Kale demanded, doing a quick head count. All present, Valencia confirmed, though her lips were already turning blue. But we won't last long like this. The cold. We shift, Garrett interrupted. Fur is better insulation than human skin. We shift and pile up like we did in the cabin. The Omega can't shift with us, Lyra pointed out, her teeth chattering. She'll be crushed in the middle, and she needs the warmth most. She's not built for this cold. Then we shift around her, Kale decided. Create a den. She stays human in the center. We provide the heat and protection. Your Majesty, with respect? That's, Valencia started. Not a debate, Kale cut her off. His gold eyes swept the group, fierce and unyielding. We survived because of her. We will not let her die because of us. Shift. Now. That's an order. The transformation rippled through the group. One by one, humans became wolves again, massive, powerful creatures designed for survival in harsh climates. They arranged themselves with military precision, largest wolves on the outside facing the wind, smaller ones toward the center where Elowen huddled. Kale was the last to shift. He held her gaze for a long moment, something unreadable in those golden eyes. Then he changed, and the massive black wolf stood before her once more. He lay down directly against her, his body a wall of warmth. The other wolves closed in, forming layers of fur and heat around her. Lyra pressed against her left side. A large gray male she didn't know took her right. More wolves piled on top, creating a living cave of fur with Elowen at its heart. It should have been terrifying, should have been suffocating. 15 massive predators pinning her down, their weight enormous, their teeth inches from her skin. Instead, it was the safest Elowen had ever felt. The wolves' body heat began to accumulate in their makeshift den. Their breathing created a pocket of warm, moist air. The wind still howled outside. The cold still killed anything foolish enough to face it. But here in the center of the pack, Elowen was warm. She was alive. And she wasn't alone. Tears burned her eyes. She tried to hold them back, but exhaustion and fear and overwhelming gratitude broke through her defenses. She cried silently, her shoulders shaking, her face pressed into Kale's thick fur. The wolf made a low, rumbling sound, not a growl. Something gentler, comforting. His massive head turned, and he nuzzled her face with his muzzle, licking away her tears with a warm tongue. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I lost your shelter. I'm sorry I couldn't keep you safe. I'm sorry." Kale huffed a sound of clear disagreement and nuzzled her again. Around them, the other wolves made similar sounds. Reassurance. Comfort. Pack noises. Elowen realized with a start. They were treating her like pack. "Rest," a voice said. Elowen's eyes snapped open in shock. The voice had been in her head, warm and deep, and unmistakably Kale's. "You've done enough, brave Omega. Let us protect you for a while." "How?" she started. "Alpha privilege," he replied, amusement coloring his mental tone. "I can speak mind to mind with any wolf in my presence. Now stop thinking and sleep. You're exhausted, and we have a long wait ahead of us. The storm will end when it ends. We'll survive it together, I promise." Elowen wanted to argue, wanted to stay vigilant, to watch for dangers, to keep herself separate and safe the way she'd learned to do. But she was so tired, bone deep, soul-weary tired, and for the first time in 14 years, she had something telling her it was okay to rest. So she closed her eyes and let the darkness take her. She woke to eerie silence. The wind had stopped. The howling had ceased. The world outside their den of wolves was quiet in a way that felt almost unnatural after days of constant noise. Elowen stirred, and immediately felt the wolves around her shift. They'd stayed in wolf form, she realized. Stayed in position around her all night, protecting her while she slept. "The storm's over," she whispered. Kale lifted his head, ears swiveling. Then he carefully extricated himself from the pile and padded to the edge of their shelter. He looked out, assessing, then shifted back to human form. "The storm has passed," he confirmed. "But the damage..." He trailed off, his expression grim. One by one, the other wolves shifted and crawled out of their den. Elowen followed, her muscles stiff and aching from a night curled in an awkward position. What she saw took her breath away. The forest was transformed. Snow had piled in drifts taller than her head. Trees had been snapped like twigs by the wind. And in the distance, where her cabin should have been, There was only a mound of white, completely buried, completely destroyed. "Oh," she breathed. Just that one word, because nothing else would come. "I'm sorry," Lyra said softly, appearing at her side. "I know it wasn't much, but it was yours. It was all I had." Elowen corrected, her voice hollow. "Everything I owned. Every memory of my mother. All of it. Gone." "Not everything," Valencia said, holding up the bundle of blankets she'd grabbed during the evacuation. "We saved what we could. It wasn't much. A few blankets, some canned goods, her mother's old shawl." Elowen took the shawl with trembling hands, pressing it to her face. It still smelled like her mother, lavender and honey and safety. She'd lost everything else. But she had this. It was something. "What now?" the young blonde male asked. He'd introduced himself as Finn during the night, speaking mind to mind the way Kale had. "We're stranded in Omega territory with no supplies, no shelter, and no way to contact the capital." "We walk," Kale said simply. "The forward outpost is 2 days northeast. We can make it in wolf form in less time if the weather holds." "And her?" Garrett jerked his chin at Elowen. "She can't keep pace with us in wolf form. And she certainly can't walk 2 days through snow this deep in human form." All eyes turned to Elowen. She straightened her spine, refusing to be the weak link. "I'll manage. I've survived worse." "Have you survived a 2-day forced march through chest-deep snow in temperatures well below freezing?" Valencia asked, not unkindly. "Because that's what we're looking at." Then I'll stay here," Elowen said, lifting her chin. "Find shelter, wait for rescue. You don't need to slow down for me." "Absolutely not," Kale said flatly. "We're not leaving you." "Your Majesty, be reasonable," Valencia argued. "She'll slow us down. We could make the outpost in half a day if we run in wolf form. With her, it'll take 3 days minimum. And we have no food, no water beyond melting snow." "No." "I said no," Kale interrupted, his voice dropping to that dangerous alpha rumble. "Elowen stays with us. We'll figure out the logistics." "I can carry her," Garrett offered. "In wolf form, she's small enough." "For 2 days?" Finn shook his head. "That's insane. Even you'd be exhausted by the end, and then we'd have 2 liabilities instead of 1. "We could take turns," Lyra suggested. "Rotate who carries her every few hours, distribute the burden." They were talking about her like she was cargo. A problem to be solved. Elowen felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. This was exactly why she'd learned to survive alone. She refused to be anyone's burden. "I have another idea," Kale said quietly, "but Elowen has to agree to it." Everyone fell silent. Kale approached her slowly, those gold eyes intense on her face. "There's a way to make this work, a way to keep you safe, keep you warm, and allow us to move at full speed." "How?" Elowen asked warily. "You become part of the pack," he said. "Officially. Right now. I perform a temporary pack bond. It'll link you to us, let you shift with our protection, let you draw on our strength. You'll be able to keep pace with us in wolf form because you'll have alpha-level power backing you." Elowen's mouth fell open. That's not possible. Omegas can't bond to alpha packs." "The power differential is exactly why it would work," Kale interrupted. "My power would stabilize yours, give you what you need to survive. But it comes with a cost." "What cost?" His gaze was steady, unflinching. "You'd be bound to me, to my pack. For as long as the bond holds, which could be days or weeks depending on how strong the connection becomes, you'd feel my emotions, my presence. You'd be compelled to stay close to the pack, and breaking the bond," he hesitated. "Breaking it could hurt, a lot. And if I refuse, then we carry you," he said simply. "And we move slowly, and we risk all our lives because I refuse to leave you behind. The choice is yours, Elowen. But I'm asking you to trust me. Trust us. Let us help you." Elowen looked around at the 15 wolves watching her. The royal guard, the most elite warriors in the kingdom. And they were waiting for her decision like it mattered, like she mattered. "If I agree," she said slowly, "what happens after we reach the outpost?" That's up to you, Kale replied. The bond can be severed once you're safe. You can return to your pack, or, he paused, or you can stay with us, join the royal pack officially. You'd never be alone again, Elowyn. Never cold, never hungry, never abandoned. It was too much, too tempting, too impossible. Why? She whispered. Why do you care so much about 1 Omega? Kale stepped closer, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his bare skin. He reached out slowly, cupping her face with both hands, forcing her to meet his gaze. Because in all my years as king, he said quietly, I've never met anyone with a heart as pure as yours. You saved us without hesitation, without expectation, without fear. You gave everything you had to strangers who could have killed you. That kind of courage, that kind of compassion that's rarer than any power, any title, any throne. And I'll be damned if I let the world break you. Elowyn felt tears slip down her cheeks. I'm scared. I know, he said gently. But I promise you, I will keep you safe. We all will. You just have to let us. She looked into those impossible gold eyes and saw only truth. Okay, she breathed. Okay, I trust you. Kale's smile was like sunrise. Then, let's begin. Chapter 5. The Bonding. Kale released her face and stepped back, his expression shifting from gentle to ceremonial. The other wolves formed a circle around them, standing at attention like guards witnessing something sacred. The morning sun broke through the dispersing storm clouds, casting golden light across the snow-covered landscape. This is an ancient ritual, Kale explained, his voice taking on a formal cadence. Older than the kingdoms, older than the hierarchies we've built. In the beginning, all wolves were equal alphas, betas, omegas. We survived together, or we died alone. This bond honors that truth. Elowyn's heart hammered against her ribs. What do I need to do? Give me your hands. She extended them, trembling slightly. Kale took them in his palms warm and rough. The contact sent a jolt through her system, not quite electric, but something deeper. Recognition, her wolf whispered. Destiny. Elowyn Thornheart, Kale began, his gold eyes locked on hers. Do you willingly accept this bond? Do you offer your trust to this pack? Your strength to our cause? Your heart to our protection? The words felt heavy with power, with meaning that went beyond their surface. This wasn't just about survival, this was about belonging, about choosing to be part of something greater than herself. I do, she whispered. Do you swear to honor the pack, to stand with us in darkness and light, to share in our burdens as we share in yours? I do. Kale's grip tightened on her hands. Then by the power vested in me as Alpha King, by the ancient laws that bind our kind, I claim you as pack. I offer you my strength, my protection, my loyalty. What threatens you threatens me. What hurts you hurts me. We are bound, from this moment forward, until death or choice parts us. The last word barely left his lips before the world exploded. Power slammed into Elowyn like a tidal wave. Not her power, his. Alpha strength, raw and overwhelming, pouring into her system through their joined hands. She gasped, her knees buckling, but Kale held her upright. His eyes blazed pure gold, no white visible, no pupil, just molten power. Don't fight it, he commanded, his voice echoing with alpha compulsion. Let it in. Let it change you. Elowyn had no choice. The power flooded through her veins like liquid fire, burning away everything weak, everything broken. Her wolf, small and timid and cowering, suddenly roared to life, growing, strengthening, fed by alpha magic until she was no longer a frightened shadow but something magnificent. She felt the others too. 15 distinct presences blooming in her mind like stars. Valencia's sharp intelligence, Garrett's steady strength, Lyra's gentle warmth, Finn's playful energy. Each member of the Royal Guard became a point of light in her consciousness, connected by threads of pack bond. And at the center of it all was Kale, blazing like the sun. His presence in her mind was enormous, overwhelming, all-consuming. She felt his power, yes, but also his emotions, his fierce protectiveness, his unexpected tenderness, his absolute certainty that she was worth saving. It was too much, too intense. Elowyn felt herself fracturing under the weight of it all. Stay with me, Kale's voice, both out loud and in her mind. You can handle this. You're stronger than you know. I can't, she gasped. You can. You already have. You survived 14 years alone. You saved 16 lives without hesitation. You faced down an Alpha King with courage. This power doesn't make you strong, Elowen. It just reveals what was always there. His words anchored her, gave her something to hold on to as the transformation completed. The fire in her veins began to cool, settling into a steady warmth. The presences in her mind shifted from overwhelming to comfortable, and her wolf goddess, her wolf, stood tall and proud for the first time in her life. Elowen opened eyes she didn't remember closing. Kale was smiling at her, his own eyes back to their normal gold. Welcome to the pack, Elowen. She tried to respond, but her voice came out as a sob. The emotion was too much joy and relief and belonging all tangled together. She'd spent 14 years invisible, untouchable, alone, and now she had 16 wolves in her head, their warmth and acceptance washing over her like a benediction. I know, Kale said softly, pulling her into an embrace. I know, let it out. So she did. She cried against his bare chest while the Alpha King held her, while the royal guard surrounded them in a protective circle, while the sun rose higher and painted the snow with gold. She cried for every lonely night, every cruel word, every moment she'd believed she was worthless. And when she was done, when the tears finally stopped, she felt lighter, cleaner, reborn. Better? Lyra asked gently, appearing at her side with a blanket. Elowen nodded, accepting the covering. Now that the bonding was complete, she was acutely aware that Kale was still naked, that all of them were naked except for the makeshift wraps some had fashioned. Her face heated with embarrassment. Kale chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest, and bizarrely echoing through the pack bond. You'll get used to it. Werewolves aren't modest creatures. We shift too often to care about nudity. Still, Valencia said dryly, we should probably figure out the clothing situation before we start our journey. I'd rather not arrive at the forward outpost with the Alpha King in all his glory. The soldiers will never let him live it down. That got laughs from the group, breaking the emotional tension. Priorities, Kale agreed, releasing Elowen and turning to address his guard. We need to assess our resources, plan our route, and determine our best speed. Garrett, what's your read on the weather? The big man tilted his head back, sniffing the air. Cold but clear. No more storms on the horizon. At least not for the next few days. But the snow is deep 4 feet in some places, deeper in the drifts. Traveling in human form would be suicide. Wolf form it is then, Kale decided. Elowen, how do you feel? Can you shift? She blinked, startled. She hadn't even thought about shifting. The transformation had always been painful for her, difficult, something she avoided unless absolutely necessary. But now, with the pack bond humming in her veins, I think so, she said slowly. It feels different. Easier. Try it, Kale encouraged. We'll be right here if something goes wrong. Elowen took a deep breath and reached for her wolf. Normally, this was like trying to grasp smoke. Her wolf was so small, so weak, that the shift required intense concentration and left her exhausted. Not anymore. Her wolf rose up like a tidal wave, powerful and eager. The shift happened in a heartbeat, bones rearranging, fur sprouting, senses sharpening. One moment she was human, the next she was standing on 4 legs, her perspective shifted closer to the ground. But this wasn't her old wolf. This wasn't the small, frightened creature that had barely qualified as a predator. This wolf was bigger, stronger. Her fur was the color of moonlight, silver white, with hints of pale gold. Her paws were larger, her legs more muscled. When she looked up at Kale, she saw shock in his golden eyes. Goddess, Valencia breathed. She's beautiful. Elowen looked down at herself, or tried to. All she could see was pale, gleaming fur. She felt different. Powerful in a way she'd never experienced. The pack bond pulsed in her chest, feeding her strength, stabilizing her form. How do you feel? Kale asked through the mind link, and hearing his voice in her head while in wolf form felt natural. Right. Strong, she replied, testing the mental connection. Her mind voice came out clear, steady. I feel strong. You are strong, he corrected. You always were. Now you just have the power to match it. He shifted. The massive black wolf appearing in place of the man. Let's see if you can keep up with us. It was a challenge. A playful one, judging by the warmth in his mental tone. The other wolves shifted as well, forming a pack of magnificent creatures, all of them larger and more powerful than any wild wolf had a right to be. Kale took off running. Eowyn's instincts kicked in before her mind could catch up. She bolted after him, her legs eating up ground in powerful strides. Snow flew beneath her paws. The cold air burned in her lungs, but in a good way, an alive way. She dodged around trees, leaped over fallen logs, her new body responding to her commands with a grace she'd never possessed. Kale was fast, alpha fast, but she kept pace. The pack bond fed her strength, let her draw on his power to supplement her own. She felt the others running behind her, their presences warm in her mind. Valencia's competitive spirit, Garrett's steady endurance, Lyra's quiet joy. They ran for the pure pleasure of it, celebrating survival, celebrating the bond, celebrating life after coming so close to death. When they finally stopped, Eowyn wasn't even winded. Her tongue lolled in a wolf's version of a grin. This was what it felt like to be part of a pack. This was what she'd been missing all these years. Not bad, little Omega. Garrett's voice rumbled through the link, his tone approving. Not bad at all. She's better than not bad, Finn corrected enthusiastically. Did you see her take that fallen tree? That jump would have challenged a beta, because she is better than not bad, Kale said, his mental voice warm with pride. She's pack now, my pack, and my pack doesn't do mediocre. The casual possessiveness in his tone sent an unexpected thrill through Eowyn. My pack, she was his pack. After 14 years of belonging to no one, of being claimed by no one, she was his. All right, enough playing, Valencia cut in, ever the practical one. We need to move. The outpost isn't getting any closer while we stand here congratulating ourselves. She's right, Kale agreed. Formation positions. Garrett, you take point. Valencia, rear guard. Everyone else, standard patrol formation. Eowyn stays in the center with me. If anything happens, you protect her first. Understood? A chorus of agreement echoed through the mind link. They set off at a steady lope, heading northeast through the snow-covered forest. The formation was clearly practiced. The royal guards moved with military precision, each wolf knowing their position, their role. They created a moving shield around Eowyn and Kale, protecting their king and their newest pack member. Eowyn had never felt so safe in her life. They traveled for hours, stopping only briefly to rest and drink from half-frozen streams. The pack bond made it easy. She could feel when someone was tiring, when someone needed a break, when the group as a whole was ready to push forward again. It was like being part of a single organism, 15 wolves moving as one. As the day wore on, Eowyn became aware of something else flowing through the bond. Emotions that weren't hers. Kale's emotions. Specifically, he was worried, not about the journey that was proceeding smoothly. He was worried about what came next, about returning to the capital, about facing Alpha Donovan, about her. Stop overthinking, she told him through their private link. She'd discovered they could communicate one-on-one, separate from the group channel. I can feel you worrying. You can feel that? He sounded surprised. The bond goes both ways, remember? You said it yourself. What hurts me hurts you. Apparently, what worries you worries me too. A pause. Then, I'm sorry. I'm not used to having someone in my head who can read me so clearly. What are you worried about? She pressed. Another pause. Longer this time. They'd been running for what felt like hours, the sun beginning its descent toward the horizon. The outpost had to be close now. I'm worried about what happens when we get back to civilization, Kale finally admitted. When the other packs find out I've bonded an Omega from Silverpine, when Donovan realizes you're not dead, when the council questions my decision to grant you pack status. You're worried you made a mistake, Eowyn interpreted, her heart sinking. No, The force of his denial echoed through the bond, making several of the other wolves glance their way. No, Elowen. Bonding you was the most right thing I've done in years. I'm worried about the politics, the fallout, the enemies who'll try to use this against us. Against you, she corrected. Against us, he repeated firmly. Your pack now, my pack, which means my enemies are your enemies. And I have a lot of enemies, Elowen, more than you know. Some of them won't hesitate to hurt you to get to me. The thought should have terrified her, should have made her want to run, to break the bond, to go back to being invisible and safe. Instead, she felt anger, hot and fierce. Let them try. Kale's surprise rippled through the bond. You're not afraid? Oh, I'm terrified, she admitted. But I'm also done being treated like I'm disposable. If your enemies want to come for me, they'll find out that this Omega has teeth now. His laughter echoed through her mind, warm and genuine. You really are something special, you know that? Before she could respond, Garrett's voice cut through the pack link. Outpost ahead. Half a mile. I can see the smoke from their fires. Everyone stay alert, Kale commanded, his demeanor shifting instantly from companion to king. We don't know who's stationed there or what they might have heard about our disappearance. Valencia, with me. The rest of you guard formation around Elowen. The pack tightened their formation, the wolves closing ranks. Elowen found herself surrounded by powerful bodies, protected on all sides. It should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt like home. They crested a small rise, and the outpost came into view. It was larger than Elowen had expected, a wooden fortress built into the side of a mountain, with high walls and guard towers. Smoke rose from multiple chimneys. Wolves, both in human and animal form, patrolled the perimeter. This was a military installation, designed to house and protect a significant force, and they were about to walk right into it with no warning, no supplies, and a newly bonded Omega. This should be interesting. Valencia muttered through the link. Stay close to me, Kale told Elowen. No matter what happens, stay close. Trust the bond, trust the pack. We won't let anything happen to you. They descended toward the outpost together. Elowen's new life was about to begin. Chapter 6. The Forward Outpost. The guards spotted them before they reached the gates. Halt! Identify yourselves. A commanding voice rang out from the nearest tower. A man stood there, broad-shouldered, dark-skinned, with the bearing of a military officer. His hand rested on what looked like a crossbow, though Elowen suspected it was loaded with something more supernatural than regular bolts. Kale shifted mid-stride, his transformation so smooth it barely broke his pace. One moment, a massive black wolf. The next, a naked man striding through the snow like he owned the world. Which, Elowen supposed, he technically did. Commander Thorn, Kale called up, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. I suggest you lower that weapon before you accidentally shoot your king. The effect was instantaneous. The commander's face went from suspicious to shocked to horrified in the span of 3 seconds. Your Majesty? He whirled to someone behind him. Open the gates. Open the damn gates, now. The king is alive. The outpost exploded into motion. The massive wooden gates swung inward, soldiers pouring out to form an honor guard. Every one of them dropped to one knee as Kale approached, fists over their hearts in salute. Their shock was palpable, clearly. They'd given him up for dead in the storm. Rise, Kale commanded. We don't have time for ceremony. My guard needs shelter, food, and warm clothes. And someone get me a damn pair of pants. That broke the tension. Several soldiers actually laughed, and a young woman sprinted back toward the main building, presumably to fetch clothing. Commander Thorn descended from his tower, moving with military efficiency. He was older than Kale, mid-50s, perhaps with gray threading through his black hair and scars that spoke of decades of service. When he reached Kale, he didn't kneel again. Instead, he clasped forearms with his king, in what was clearly a gesture of deep respect and relief. We thought you were dead, Thorn said bluntly, his voice rough with emotion. The storm hit so fast, so hard. When you didn't return from patrol and we lost all communication. The capital has been in chaos for 3 days. They're preparing succession protocols. Kale's expression darkened. Succession protocols? Already? The council insisted. With no word from you or your guard, they assumed the worst. Thorn's gaze swept over the assembled wolves, still in animal form. I see you all survived. That's miraculous, honestly. How? We'll brief you inside, Kale said, after we're warm and clothed. But first. He turned, gesturing toward where Elowen stood in wolf form, still surrounded by her protective guard. I need to introduce someone. Every eye in the outpost turned toward her. Elowen fought the urge to shrink back, to make herself small and invisible like she'd learned to do in Silverpine. But she wasn't in Silverpine anymore. She was Pack now. Kale's pack. She had 16 wolves at her back who would die for her, so she lifted her head and met their stares head-on. Shift, Elowen, Kale said gently through their private link. Let them see you. Show them the wolf who saved their king. She shifted, the transformation coming easily now. Human again, she stood in the snow wearing nothing but her mother's shawl which she clutched around herself desperately. Her long dark hair fell around her shoulders, and she could feel every soldier's gaze assessing her. Small, thin, unremarkable. Everything an Omega was supposed to be, except for her eyes. Her eyes, she knew, now held the reflection of alpha power. The bond had changed her on a fundamental level, and it showed. Gentlemen, Kale said, his voice carrying across the outpost. This is Elowen Thornheart. She's the reason your king stands before you today. She saved my life, and the lives of my entire guard during the storm. She gave us shelter, warmth, and protection at great personal cost. And as of this morning, she is a full member of the royal pack. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Commander Thorn did something that made Elowen's throat tight. He went down on one knee, fist over his heart, and bowed his head. My lady, he said formally. You have the gratitude of the Northern Guard and the loyalty of every soldier in this outpost. Welcome. One by one, the other soldiers followed suit. Dozens of warriors, dropping to their knees in the snow, bowing to an Omega. Elowen couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. Breathe. Kale murmured through the bond. You deserve this. Every bit of it. The young woman who'd gone for clothes returned at a run, her arms full of fabric. She approached Kale first, offering him pants and a shirt, both of which he donned with casual efficiency. Then, she turned to Elowen, her expression awed. My lady, she said breathlessly. I brought these for you. They might be too big, but they're perfect, Elowen interrupted, accepting the bundle gratefully. Warm wool pants, a thick tunic, fur-lined boots, and a heavy cloak. Practical military clothing, meant for survival in harsh conditions. Thank you. The girl beamed like Elowen had given her the world. I'm Sergeant Maya. If you need anything at all, just ask. It's an honor to serve you. The honor is mine, Elowen replied, and meant it. She dressed quickly, aware of too many eyes still watching. The clothes were indeed too large, clearly meant for someone a foot taller and 50 pounds heavier, but they were warm and clean, and that was all that mattered. The boots were the biggest problem. She had to stuff the toes with extra fabric to keep them from falling off. The other guards shifted and dressed as well, accepting clothing from the soldiers, who seemed almost desperate to help. Within minutes, they'd transformed from a pack of wild wolves into a military unit armed, clothed, and ready for whatever came next. Inside, Kale commanded. Now, we need to contact the capital and brief Commander Thorn on everything that's happened. Elowen, you're with me. The last was said with a tone that brooked no argument. Not that Elowen had any intention of leaving his side. The outpost, while clearly loyal, was still full of strange wolves. Powerful wolves. Dominant wolves who made her instincts scream. Only the pack bond kept her steady. They moved as a unit toward the main building, a large structure that served as both headquarters and barracks. Inside, it was warm and bright, with fires burning in multiple hearths and the smell of cooking food making Elowen's stomach growl audibly. When was the last time she'd eaten? Yesterday? The day before? Everything since the storm hit was a blur. Kitchen first, Kale decided, apparently hearing her stomach through the bond. Or maybe just seeing the way her eyes tracked the smell of food. Then the briefing. "Your Majesty, the capital is waiting." Thorne started. "The capital can wait another 20 minutes, Kale interrupted firmly. "My pack needs food. They've been surviving on nothing for days. We eat first." The mess hall was already filled with off-duty soldiers eating an early dinner. Every conversation stopped when Kale entered. Every soldier rose to attention. "As you were," Kale said, waving them back to their seats. But of course, no one actually sat. They stood there, staring, as the Alpha King led his guard to the serving line like this was perfectly normal. Eowyn found herself ushered to the front of the line by soldiers who seemed terrified she might collapse. Plates were piled high with roasted meat, vegetables, bread, cheese, more food than she'd seen in months. She accepted it with trembling hands, overwhelmed by the sheer abundance. Kale guided her to a private table in the corner, his hand warm on the small of her back. The gesture was casually possessive in a way that made several soldiers raise eyebrows. The rest of the guard joined them, forming their familiar protective circle. "Eat," Kale ordered gently. "Don't worry about manners or propriety, just eat." Eowyn didn't need to be told twice. She dug in with a desperation that would have embarrassed her under normal circumstances. The food was simple, standard military fare, but to someone who'd been slowly starving for years, it was ambrosia. Meat that actually had flavor, bread that wasn't stale, vegetables that hadn't been rationed down to a few sad pieces. She ate until her stomach hurt, until she physically couldn't take another bite. Around her, the guard did the same. Even Kale, who probably could have maintained his kingly dignity, ate with single-minded focus. When she finally pushed her plate away, tears were streaming down her face again. "Eowyn?" Lyra asked with concern. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Eowyn managed. "Everything. I forgot what it felt like. To be full, to not be hungry." She laughed, the sound halfway to a sob. "That's pathetic, isn't it?" "No," Kale said fiercely. "What's pathetic is a pack that let you starve. What's pathetic is an alpha who didn't protect his omega. What's pathetic is a system that treats wolves like you as disposable." His hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. "You'll never be hungry again, Eowyn. I promise you that. Pack takes care of pack. Pack takes care of pack." The others echoed in unison. Fresh tears fell. But these were different. These were relief. Gratitude. Hope. The meal continued with easy conversation, the guard sharing stories of their journey, the soldiers asking questions they were clearly dying to ask but had been too polite to voice. Eowyn mostly listened, content to fade into the background, until someone asked the question she'd been dreading. "Begging your pardon, Your Majesty," a young soldier said hesitantly. "But how did you end up in the storm in the first place?" "The patrol was supposed to return before the weather turned." Kale's expression hardened. "We were delayed. By the time we realized how fast the storm was moving, it was too late. We tried to find shelter, but the cold was killing us faster than we could move. We would have died if not for Eowyn." "She took you in?" Commander Thorne asked, his tone making it clear he'd already guessed there was more to the story. "She dragged us across her threshold one by one," Valencia said quietly. 15 dying wolves. She used her own supplies to warm us, fed us her own food, gave us her own shelter. And when the storm destroyed her cabin, she nearly died, because she was too busy making sure we survived first." Silence fell like a stone. "That cabin," Thorne said slowly. "Would that be the Omega dwelling on the edge of Silverpine territory?" "Yes," Eowyn confirmed, her voice small. "The one that's barely standing?" "That the Silverpine pack was supposed to repair last summer but never did because they claimed it wasn't worth the resources?" Her face burned with shame. "That's the one." Thorne's expression was murderous. "And where was the rest of Silverpine pack during the storm? At the pack house? All warm and safe, while they left you to die in a structure they knew wasn't sound?" "It's not," Eowyn started. "It's exactly what it sounds like." Kale interrupted, his voice arctic. "Alpha Donovan abandoned his Omega. Deliberately, with full knowledge that she would likely die. Which brings me to the real reason we need to contact the capital." he turned to Thorn. I'm formally charging Alpha Donovan with violation of pack law, abandonment of a pack member, attempted negligent homicide. And I want the council convened immediately to strip him of his title. The mess hall erupted. Soldiers gasped, whispered, stared. An Alpha being stripped of his title was rare. It required proof of serious crimes and a vote from the Council of Alphas. But if the Alpha King himself brought charges, Your Majesty, Thorn said carefully, That's a serious accusation. The council will demand proof. They'll have it, Kale promised darkly. Elowen is my proof. Her body tells the story of years of neglect and abuse. Her cabin, what's left of it, will show the conditions she was forced to live in. And I have 16 witnesses who will testify that she was left to die, while the rest of her pack sheltered in comfort and safety. The council won't like this, Valencia warned. Donovan has allies, powerful ones. They'll claim you're overstepping. That internal pack discipline is not the king's concern. Then they can challenge me, Kale said flatly. I'd welcome the opportunity to explain to the council exactly how I feel about alphas who abuse their authority and abandon their weakest members. In detail. With demonstrations if necessary. The threat in his voice was unmistakable. Several soldiers actually grinned apparently. The idea of their king going toe-to-toe with corrupt alphas appealed to them. Elowen, however, felt sick. This is my fault, she whispered. I'm causing problems for you already. No, Kale said immediately, turning to face her fully. This is not your fault. This is Donovan's fault for being a piss-poor alpha. This is the system's fault for allowing omegas to be treated like trash. This is the council's fault for not enforcing the laws that are supposed to protect wolves like you. But it is not, and never will be, your fault. He's right, Garrett rumbled. We've been looking for an excuse to clean house in the alpha community for years. Too many of them abuse their power, mistreat their weaker members, ignore the laws that are supposed to keep everyone safe. You're not causing problems, Elowen. You're giving us the opportunity to fix them. And if the council doesn't like it, Lyra added with a sweet smile that had steel underneath, well, they can take it up with 16 very protective royal guards who are extremely fond of their newest pack member. The others murmured agreement, and through the pack bond, Elowen felt their sincerity. They meant it. They would fight for her, die for her, if necessary. These wolves, she'd known for barely 2 days, cared more about her well-being than the pack she'd been born into. All right, Commander Thorn said, rising to his feet. If we're going to war with the council, we'd better do it right. Let's get you to the communications room. The capital needs to know their king is alive, and Alpha Donovan needs to know his days are numbered. They moved as a group toward the communications center, a heavily fortified room in the heart of the outpost. Elowen had never seen anything like it. Crystals covered the walls, glowing with soft light. A massive table dominated the center, its surface etched with runes and symbols she didn't recognize. Magical communication array, Finn explained, seeing her confusion. Works on pack bonds and alpha power. Lets the king communicate with the capital instantly, no matter the distance. Thorn moved to the table, placing his hands on 2 of the glowing crystals. They flared brighter at his touch. Commander Thorn of Northern Outpost 9, requesting immediate connection to the capital. Priority Alpha, the king lives. The crystals pulsed, and then a voice filled the room, male, older, heavy with authority. This is Chancellor Aldrich of the Council. Commander, please repeat that last statement. The king lives, Thorn repeated clearly. Alpha King Kale, Stormborn, and his royal guard are alive and currently sheltered at my outpost. They survived the storm and are ready to return to the capital. A pause. Then, praise the goddess. Your Majesty, are you there? Kale stepped forward, placing his own hands on the crystals. I'm here, Aldrich, alive and well, along with my guard. I'm sure rumors of my death were greatly exaggerated. Rumors? Your Majesty, the entire kingdom has been in mourning for 3 days. We thought you were lost. The succession protocols can be reversed, Kale interrupted smoothly. I'm not dead, so there's no need for succession. But I do have urgent business that requires the council's immediate attention. Another pause, this one more cautious. What kind of business, Your Majesty? The kind that involves stripping an alpha of his title, Cale said coldly. I'm formally charging Alpha Donovan of Silverpine with abandonment and abuse of a pack member. I have evidence, witnesses, and the victim herself. I want the council convened within 3 days to hear the charges. 1. Silence. Long and heavy. Then, Your Majesty, you understand what you're asking? Stripping an alpha's title requires— I know exactly what it requires. Cale cut him off. And I'm prepared to provide everything necessary. This isn't a request, Aldrich. It's a command. Convene the council. Now. Yes, Your Majesty, Aldrich replied, his tone carefully neutral. Will you be returning to the capital immediately? We'll leave at first light. We should arrive within 2 days if the weather holds. We'll prepare for your arrival. And, Your Majesty, it's good to have you back. It's good to be back, Cale agreed. Cale out. The crystals dimmed as the connection severed. Cale turned to Elowen, his expression gentle despite the hardness that had been in his voice moments before. Are you ready for this? Because once we reach the capital, there's no going back. You'll have to testify against Donovan. Face him in front of the council. Tell them everything he did to you. Elowen's hands were shaking. She clenched them into fists, refusing to show weakness. I'm terrified, she admitted. But yes, I'm ready. Because if I don't do this, he'll just do it to the next Omega. And the next. And the next. Someone has to stop him. Cale's smile was fierce with pride. That's my girl. My girl. The words sent warmth flooding through her chest. She was his. His pack. His to protect. His to care for. And maybe, just maybe, his to love. Chapter 7. The Journey to Reckoning. They left at dawn, just as Cale had promised. The outpost had transformed overnight into a flurry of activity. Soldiers prepared supplies for the king's journey. Food, water, clothing, weapons, everything the royal party might need for a 2-day trek through winter wilderness. Commander Thorne had insisted on sending an escort of 20 additional soldiers, but Cale had refused. We travel fast and light, he'd said. The guard is sufficient protection, and I need your soldiers here maintaining the northern border. We can't leave our defenses weakened just because I decided to go for a walk in a blizzard. Thorne had argued, but ultimately deferred to his king's judgment. Now, as the sun painted the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold, Elowen stood at the outpost gates with the rest of the pack. She wore new clothes, proper traveling gear that actually fit, courtesy of the outpost's quartermaster who'd stayed up half the night making alterations. Warm pants, a tunic lined with fur, boots that didn't slip off, and a cloak so thick she could barely feel the cold. She felt like a different person, looked like one too, judging by the way soldiers kept sneaking glances at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to respect. Ready? Cale asked, appearing at her side. He'd been in meetings with Thorne for most of the night, planning their route and coordinating security measures for when they reached the capital. He looked tired, but the bond told her he was running on determination and alpha stubbornness. Ready, she confirmed, though her stomach churned with anxiety. They shifted as a group, the transformation now as natural as breathing for Elowen. Her silver-white wolf emerged smoothly, powerful muscles coiling beneath her fur. She'd caught sight of herself in a window earlier and barely recognized the creature staring back. This wolf bore no resemblance to the small, frightened Omega who'd struggled with every shift. This wolf was magnificent. You keep looking at yourself like you can't believe you're real, Lyra said through the pack bond, amusement coloring her mental voice. The small gray wolf padded over, her tail wagging gently. You need to accept it, Elowen. You were always meant to be this. The bond just revealed what was buried. I was an Omega for 14 years. Elowen replied. It's hard to forget that overnight. Then don't forget it, Cale said, his massive black wolf moving to her other side. Remember who you were. Remember what you survived. But don't let it define who you're becoming. They set off northeast, toward the capital city of Lunaris. The formation was the same as yesterday, Garrett on point, Valencia on rear guard, the others forming a protective circle around Cale and Elowen. But today felt different. Today they weren't just surviving, they were going home. Well, they were going to Kale's home. Elowen had no home anymore. Stop that, Kale said through their private link. Stop what? Spiraling. I can feel your anxiety through the bond. You're thinking about what comes next, about the trial, about facing Donovan. Shouldn't I be thinking about those things? She countered. Not yet. Right now, just run. Feel the sun on your fur, the snow under your paws, the pack at your side. Everything else can wait. He was right, of course. Worrying wouldn't change anything. So Elowen forced herself to focus on the moment, the rhythm of running, the crisp winter air, the companionable presence of wolves who'd become family in an impossibly short time. They traveled for hours, stopping only briefly to drink from streams and rest. The landscape gradually changed as they moved south and east. The deep wilderness of the northern territories gave way to more settled lands, farms, villages, signs of civilization. They gave these places wide berth, avoiding contact with anyone who might slow them down or spread word of the king's survival before he was ready. Around midday, they stopped for a longer rest in a protected grove. The wolves shifted back to human form, grateful for the chance to eat something more substantial than melted snow. The outpost had packed dried meat, hard cheese, and travel-bred simple fare. But welcome after a morning of hard running. Elowen settled against a tree, accepting food from Finn with a grateful nod. The young wolf had appointed himself her unofficial guardian, always making sure she had enough to eat, enough water, enough warmth. It was sweet, if occasionally overwhelming. You don't have to mother hen me, she told him gently. I'm not mother henning, Finn protested, his cheeks flushing. I'm just making sure you're comfortable. Your pack. It's what we do. What he means, Valencia said dryly, settling nearby, is that you're the first Omega to join the royal pack in 50 years, and we're all terrified of messing this up. So yes, we're going to hover. Deal with it. 50 years? Elowen blinked in surprise. Why so long? Because most alphas don't bond Omegas to their primary packs, Garrett explained. He was sharpening a knife he'd acquired from the outpost, his movements methodical. They keep them in secondary packs, support positions, claim it's for the Omega's safety, but really, it's just prejudice. Omegas are seen as weak links in battle packs. Which is bullshit, Lyra added firmly. Some of the strongest wolves I've ever known were Omegas. They just express their strength differently than alphas or betas. Hence why I bonded Elowen to the royal pack, Kale said, appearing from the tree line where he'd been scouting. I don't have time for prejudice or outdated hierarchy nonsense. I need wolves I can trust. Wolves with courage and heart. Elowen has both in abundance. His casual confidence in her made Elowen's throat tight. You barely know me. I know you saved my life without hesitation, Kale replied, settling beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. I know you sacrificed everything you had for strangers. I know you stood up to an alpha king when any sane wolf would have submitted. I know enough. The council won't see it that way, Valencia warned. They're going to question your judgment, claim the bond was made in haste, without proper consideration. They'll say you were traumatized by the near-death experience and made an emotional decision rather than a strategic one. Let them, Kale said calmly. I've spent 10 years as their king. They know I don't make emotional decisions. And if they push too hard... He smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. Well, I can be very persuasive when necessary. By persuasive, he means terrifying, Finn stage whispered to Elowen. I heard that, Kale said, but his tone was amused rather than annoyed. They rested for another hour before resuming their journey. The afternoon passed in a blur of running, broken only by brief pauses to navigate tricky terrain. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Garrett signaled a halt. We're about 6 hours from the capital, he reported. We could push through, arrive around midnight. Or we camp here and enter the city at dawn. Dawn, Kale decided immediately. I want full visibility when we arrive. No sneaking in under cover of darkness like we have something to hide. Plus, arriving at dawn means the council will have time to convene during the day, Valencia added. Better to face them when we're all rested, rather than exhausted from an all-night run. They made camp in a sheltered valley, using deadfall to build a fire. It felt strange to be so close to civilization yet still sleeping rough. But none of the wolves complained. This was clearly routine for them. The royal guard spent more time in the field than at the palace, apparently. As darkness fell and stars emerged overhead, the pack settled around the fire. Someone had caught a deer during the afternoon run, and it roasted on a makeshift spit, filling the air with the smell of cooking meat. Eowyn's mouth watered, despite having eaten only hours before. "Tell me about the capital," she said to no one in particular. "What's it like?" "Overwhelming," Lyra answered immediately. "Especially if you've never been to a city. Lunaris is home to nearly 50,000 wolves, plus humans and other supernaturals. The noise alone will be shocking. The palace is the oldest structure in the kingdom," Finn added enthusiastically. "Built over 3,000 years ago by the first Alpha King. It's carved into the side of a mountain, with towers that reach so high, you can see them from miles away. It's also a fortress," Garrett said more practically. "Multiple defensive walls, guard posts, every 100 feet, magical wards that would incinerate any unauthorized person who tried to enter. The king's safety is taken very seriously, which is why the council is going to lose their minds when they find out I nearly died in a blizzard," Kale muttered. "I can already hear the lectures about taking unnecessary risks." "To be fair, Your Majesty," Valencia said with a smirk, "you did nearly die in a blizzard. They might have a point." Kale threw a piece of bark at her. She caught it effortlessly, laughing. The easy camaraderie made Eowyn smile, but it also highlighted how different this pack was from anything she'd known in Silverpine. These wolves genuinely liked each other, respected each other. No one was scrambling for dominance or putting down weaker members. They just existed together, comfortable and content. "What are you thinking?" Kale asked quietly. He'd moved closer while she was lost in thought, his shoulder pressed against hers. "That I've never seen wolves treat each other like this," she admitted. "In Silverpine, everything was about hierarchy. Who was stronger, who was weaker, who deserved respect, and who didn't. But you all just care about each other, regardless of rank. That's because rank doesn't matter in a real pack," Kale said. "What matters is trust, loyalty, knowing that the wolf beside you will have your back when things go bad. I'd rather have 15 wolves I trust than 100 who only follow me because they're afraid of what happens if they don't." "Is that why you chose them?" Eowyn gestured to the others. "Because you trust them?" "I chose them because they chose me first," Kale corrected. "When I became king, the old guard expected me to keep them on. Most of them were corrupt, lazy, more interested in their own power than protecting the kingdom. I fired them all within a week. Then I put out a call any wolf who wanted to serve, regardless of rank or pack affiliation, could apply. These 15 are the ones who showed up, who proved themselves, who stayed when things got hard. I was a Delta when I applied," Garrett admitted. "Middle rank nobody from a small mountain pack. But I was good at my job, and the king didn't care about anything else. I was Omega," Lyra said quietly. "Like you. Told my whole life I was too weak to fight, too small to matter. But I'm the best tracker in 5 kingdoms, and His Majesty recognized that talent was more valuable than brute strength." Eowyn stared at her. "You were Omega?" "Born and raised," Lyra confirmed with a sad smile. "But the king gave me a chance to be more, to prove that Omega doesn't mean worthless. That's why I was so insistent about you joining the pack, Eowyn, because I know what it's like to be dismissed and overlooked. And I know what it feels like when someone finally sees your worth. We all have stories," Valencia added. "All of us came from places or situations where we were told we weren't enough. The king gave us the chance to prove otherwise. That's why we'd die for him. Not because he's powerful though he is. Not because he's king though he is. But because he sees us. Really sees us. And he makes us better than we ever thought we could be." The others murmured agreement, and through the bond, Eowyn felt their sincerity, their love for their king, their loyalty to each other. She'd stumbled into something rare, something precious. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "You're right," Kale said, and her heart plummeted. Then he continued, You deserve better. You deserve a pack that valued you from the start, a family that loved you without question, an alpha who protected you instead of abandoning you. But this is what I can offer, Elowen. This pack, this bond, this chance at something better, and I'm asking you to take it. Not because you have to, but because you want to. Did she want it? The question was laughable. She'd wanted to belong her entire life, wanted to matter, wanted to be seen as something other than a burden or a mistake. And here was an alpha king offering her exactly that. I want it, she said firmly. All of it. The pack, the bond, whatever comes next. I'm in. Kale's smile was radiant. He pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. Good. Because tomorrow, we face the council, and they're going to try to tear you apart. Question your worth, your strength, your right to be in this pack. But I need you to remember something. What? His gold eyes locked on hers, fierce and unyielding. You're not the Omega they expect. You're not weak or worthless or disposable. You're the wolf who saved a king, the wolf who survived 14 years of abuse and came out stronger, the wolf who looked death in the face and said, not today. That's who you are, Elowen Thornheart. And the council is going to learn that the hard way. Around them, the pack howled their agreement. A sound of solidarity, of family, of wolves who would stand together against whatever came next. Elowen lifted her head and howled with them, her voice joining the chorus. Tomorrow, they would face the council. Tomorrow, she would face Alpha Donovan. Tomorrow, her old life would end, and her new one would truly begin. But tonight, she was pack. She was home. She was enough. And nothing would ever take that away from her. Chapter 8. The City of Wolves. Dawn broke over the capital city of Lunaris like a promise. Elowen stood at the crest of a hill, still in wolf form, and stared at the sprawling metropolis below. Nothing could have prepared her for this. Silverpine had been a small pack, maybe 300 wolves at most, scattered across a rural territory. She'd thought that was what a pack looked like. She'd been so wrong. Lunaris stretched as far as she could see. Buildings of white stone and dark wood clustered together in organized chaos, spiraling out from a central mountain like ripples on water. And carved into that mountain, impossible to miss, impossible to ignore, was the palace. It was massive. Towers that pierced the clouds, walls that gleamed like pearl in the morning light, bridges and walkways that connected different sections in a complex web of architecture, flags bearing the royal crest. A wolf's head crowned with stars flew from every tower, snapping in the wind. Overwhelming, isn't it? Lyra's voice came through the pack bond, warm with understanding. That's one word for it, Elowen managed. Her wolf wanted to tuck tail and run. This was too much, too big, too everything. She was just an Omega from nowhere. She didn't belong in a place like this. Yes, you do, Kale said firmly through their private link. He moved to stand beside her, his massive black wolf, a solid presence. You belong wherever I say you belong. And I say you belong here, at my side, in my pack, in my home. Understand? She wanted to argue, wanted to list all the reasons why this was insane. But the bond wouldn't let her lie to him, and the truth was, she wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe she could be more than the scared, starving Omega who'd been left to die. I understand, she replied quietly. Good. Now, let's go make an entrance. They descended toward the city as the sun climbed higher. The closer they got, the more wolves Elowen sensed, hundreds, thousands of individual presences pressing against her awareness. Most were distant, background noise, but some were powerful enough that she felt them like physical touches. Alphas, dozens of them, all in one place. Her wolf whimpered, every instinct screaming at her to submit, to hide, to make herself small and invisible. Only Kale's presence through the bond kept her moving forward, his power wrapped around hers like armor, shielding her from the worst of the dominant pressure. Stay close, he commanded through the pack link. Once we enter the city, everyone will know I'm back. There will be crowds, curiosity, wolves trying to get close. The guard will keep them at a distance, but you need to stay within the formation. Don't wander off. Wasn't planning on it, Elowin assured him. They reached the outer gates, massive structures of iron and magic that could probably withstand a siege by an army. Guards in silver armor stood at attention, their eyes widening as they recognized the approaching wolves. "The king," one of them shouted. "The king has returned." The gates swung open, and chaos erupted. Wolves poured out of buildings, drawn by the commotion. Shifted and unshifted, they lined the streets, falling to their knees as Kale passed. Some were crying, openly weeping with relief. Others cheered, their voices joining in a roar that echoed off the stone buildings. "Long live the king! The king has returned! Blessed be the Alpha King!" The noise was overwhelming. The crowd was suffocating. Elowin pressed closer to Kale, grateful for the guard formation that kept the masses at bay. Valencia and Garrett were like mobile walls, their very presence enough to make even the boldest wolves think twice about getting too close. They moved through the city in a procession, heading steadily toward the palace. More wolves joined the crowd with every street they passed. Elowin caught glimpses of faces young and old, dominant and submissive, all of them looking at their king with expressions of devotion that bordered on worship. This was what it meant to be the Alpha King, not just power, but love. These wolves would die for Kale without hesitation. "He earned it," Lyra said, apparently sensing Elowin's thoughts through the bond. 10 years ago, the kingdom was falling apart. The old king was corrupt, the council was worse, and the packs were at each other's throats. Kale changed everything, reformed the laws, cleaned out the corruption, gave wolves like us a chance to rise above our ranks. He saved this kingdom. They love him because he gave them hope. Elowin looked at the massive black wolf beside her with new eyes. She'd known he was powerful, known he was king, but she hadn't understood what that meant. The weight of it. The responsibility. "Don't start pitying me," Kale said dryly through their private link. "I chose this life, and I'd choose it again, even if it means nearly dying in blizzards. Especially then, because it led me to you." The words sent warmth flooding through her chest, and she felt his amusement at her reaction through the bond. They reached the palace gates even more impressive up close, and these opened automatically, responding to Kale's presence. The crowd stayed behind, held back by guards who'd materialized from seemingly nowhere. The royal party passed through into a massive courtyard, and the gates closed behind them with a sound of absolute finality. Inside the palace walls, the chaos faded. Here, there was order. Guards in formal armor lined the walls. Servants in simple but elegant clothing waited at attention, and at the center of it all, on the steps leading to the main palace entrance, stood a group of wolves who radiated power like the sun radiated heat. The council. Kale shifted, his transformation swift and smooth. The others followed suit. And Elowin forced herself to do the same, despite her screaming instincts. Naked in human form, she was painfully aware of how small she was compared to the warriors around her. How vulnerable. Servants rushed forward with robes, simple white garments that provided minimal coverage but satisfied basic modesty. Elowin wrapped hers around herself gratefully, tying it with trembling fingers. "Your Majesty," a male voice said, heavy with relief and reproach in equal measure. 3 days. We mourned you for 3 days. The speaker was ancient, at least 80, with white hair and a face mapped with wrinkles. But his eyes were sharp, intelligent, and his power was unmistakable. This was an alpha who'd lived long enough to see kingdoms rise and fall. "Chancellor Aldrich," Kale greeted, his tone respectful but not apologetic. "My apologies for the inconvenience. I was a bit busy." "Not dying." "A bit busy," Aldrich sputtered. "Your Majesty, you disappeared into the worst storm in a century with no communication, no backup, and no apparent concern for the succession crisis your death would cause." "But I didn't die," Kale pointed out reasonably. "So there's no succession crisis. Only because of blind luck." "Not luck," Kale corrected, his tone going sharp. "Because of her." He turned, gesturing to Elowin. Every eye in the courtyard focused on her with laser intensity. The council members, at least a dozen of them, assessed her with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion to outright disdain. She forced herself to lift her chin, to meet their stares without flinching. She was Pack now. She had every right to be here, even if she didn't feel like it. "This," Cale announced, his voice carrying across the courtyard, "is Elowyn Thornheart. She saved my life and the lives of my entire royal guard during the storm. She offered shelter, supplies, and protection at great personal cost. She is the reason your king stands before you today, and as of 2 days ago, she is a full member of the royal pack." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, "An Omega," a woman said, her voice dripping with disdain. She was middle-aged, beautiful in a cold way, with auburn hair and green eyes that assessed Elowyn like she was an insect. "You bonded an Omega to the royal pack." "I bonded a hero to the royal pack," Cale corrected icily. "One who showed more courage, compassion, and honor than most alphas I've met, including, apparently, her former alpha." "Former?" Aldrich asked sharply. "Elowyn comes from the Silverpine pack," Cale said. And even though Elowyn knew this was coming, she still felt her stomach drop. Under Alpha Donovan, who, during the storm, deliberately abandoned her to die. While the rest of the pack sheltered in comfort and safety, she was left alone in a cabin he knew was structurally unsound, with minimal supplies and no support. She should have died. She would have died, if not for her own resourcefulness and determination. Murmurs rippled through the council. Some looked shocked. Others looked uncomfortable. A few, like the auburn-haired woman, looked distinctly skeptical. "That's a serious accusation," Aldrich said carefully. "Alpha Donovan is a respected member of this council. He's served faithfully for 20 years. You're claiming he attempted murder?" "I'm claiming he violated pack law," Cale corrected. "Specifically, the law that requires alphas to care for all pack members, regardless of rank. He abandoned his Omega, left her to die. The only reason she's alive is because she happened to find 15 dying wolves who needed her help. Wolves who, unlike her own pack, were grateful enough to ensure her survival in return." "Where is the proof?" the auburn-haired woman demanded. "Omegas are notorious for exaggerating their mistreatment. How do we know she's not lying to gain favor with the king?" Elowyn felt rage spike through the bond, not hers, but from all 15 royal guards simultaneously. They didn't like hearing her called a liar. "Careful, Counselor Thea," Valencia said softly, but her voice carried a lethal edge. "You're implying that our newest pack member is dishonest, which means you're implying that our king's judgment is flawed, which means you're dangerously close to challenging his authority. Would you like to continue down that path?" Thea paled slightly but held her ground. "I'm simply asking for proof. Surely that's reasonable." "The proof is standing in front of you," Garrett rumbled. "Look at her. Really look. She's malnourished, underweight, showing signs of long-term neglect. Her former residence, what's left of it, was barely fit for storage, let alone habitation. And we have 16 witnesses who will testify that the Silverpine pack left her alone during a storm that killed dozens across the Northern Territories. Plus," Finn added, "she nearly starved herself feeding us, gave us her last supplies without hesitation, even though it meant she'd have nothing left. That's not the action of someone seeking favor. That's the action of someone who's been conditioned to put everyone else's needs above her own, because she's been told her whole life that she doesn't matter." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Aldrich sighed deeply, suddenly looking every one of his 80-plus years. "Your Majesty, you understand what you're asking? To strip an alpha of his title, we need a formal trial. Evidence presented. Witnesses called. The accused given a chance to defend himself. It could take weeks." "Then we start immediately," Cale said. "Send word to Alpha Donovan. Tell him he's been summoned to the capital to answer charges of abandonment and abuse. Tell him he has 3 days to arrive, or we proceed without him." "And if he refuses to come?" Thea asked. Cale's smile was cold and utterly without mercy. "Then I'll go to Silverpine and drag him here myself, in chains if necessary, because one way or another, he will answer for what he did. Not just to Elowyn, but to every Omega who's been mistreated under his watch. Justice delayed is justice denied, and I'm done watching corrupt alphas abuse their power." Here, someone called from behind the council. Elowen couldn't see who, but several other voices murmured agreement. Aldrich closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. When he opened them, there was resignation in their depths. "Very well, Your Majesty. I'll send the summons today. The trial will convene in 1 week. That gives Alpha Donovan time to travel and prepare his defense. Is that acceptable?" "It's acceptable," Cale agreed. "Elowen will stay at the palace under my protection until the trial concludes. No one, and I mean no one, is to approach her without my explicit permission. She's under royal protection now. Any harm that comes to her will be considered an attack on the crown itself." The threat was clear. Touch Elowen, and face the Alpha King's wrath. "Of course, Your Majesty," Aldrich said. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have much to prepare." "Welcome home, Your Majesty. We're grateful to have you back." The council dispersed, though Elowen caught several of them casting looks back at her, some curious, some calculating, some openly hostile. She tried not to let it show how much their attention unnerved her. "Come," Cale said, offering her his hand. "Let me show you your new home." She took his hand, and he led her up the palace steps. The royal guard fell into formation around them, a protective cocoon against the world. As they passed through the massive doors into the palace proper, Elowen caught sight of her reflection in a polished shield hanging on the wall. A small woman in a simple white robe, dwarfed by warriors, holding the hand of a king. She looked terrified, but she also looked determined. 1 week. In 1 week, she would face Alpha Donovan in front of the entire council. In 1 week, she would have to relive every moment of abuse, neglect, and abandonment. In 1 week, she would either get justice or lose everything, but she wouldn't face it alone. She had Cale. She had the pack. She had wolves who believed in her, who would fight for her, who saw her as something more than just an Omega. That would have to be enough. Chapter 9. The Palace and the Past. The palace was a labyrinth. Elowen followed Cale through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past rooms whose purposes she couldn't begin to guess. Everything was massive ceilings that soared 30 feet high, windows tall enough to frame entire landscapes, tapestries that depicted battles and celebrations from centuries past. Servants bowed as they passed, guards saluted, and everywhere she looked there was beauty, wealth, and history. She'd never felt more out of place in her life. "Stop it," Cale said quietly, his hand still holding hers. "I can feel your anxiety through the bond. You belong here, Elowen. I'm an Omega, wearing a borrowed robe in a palace that probably costs more than my entire pack's territory," she muttered. "I think a little anxiety is warranted." "Former pack," he corrected gently. "And yes, the palace is expensive. It's also been my prison for 10 years. Stone and gold don't make a home, Elowen. People do. And right now, you're the only person here I actually want around." The admission was so raw, so honest, that she felt it echo through their bond. Loneliness. Despite being surrounded by thousands of wolves, by servants and guards and counselors, Cale was lonely. "The crown is heavy," Lyra said softly through the pack bond. She and the others had been trailing behind, giving their king and his newest pack member a semblance of privacy. "He carries the weight of the entire kingdom, makes decisions that affect millions. Every day, wolves come to him with problems, complaints, requests, but almost no one asks how he's doing, if he's all right, if he needs anything. That's why we're so protective of him," Garrett added. "We're not just his guards, we're his family, the only wolves he can truly trust." "And now you're family too," Finn said cheerfully, "which means you get to see the fun parts, like his private quarters. Very few people are allowed in the king's personal chambers. It's considered a huge honor." They stopped in front of an ornate door, dark wood, carved with wolves and stars, handles shaped like crescent moons. 2 guards stood at attention on either side, their faces carefully neutral despite the obvious curiosity in their eyes. "Your Majesty," they said in unison, bowing. "At ease," Cale replied. "I'll be in my quarters for the next few hours. No interruptions unless it's an emergency. And by emergency, I mean the palace is on fire, or we're under attack. Counselor Thea, wanting to lecture me about proper protocol, does not qualify." The guard's lips twitched with suppressed smiles. "Understood, Your Majesty." Kale opened the door and gestured for Elowen to enter. She stepped through, and her breath caught. The room was enormous but somehow still felt intimate. A massive bed dominated one wall, easily large enough for 5 people, covered in furs and pillows. Windows stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a view of the city below and the mountains beyond. A fireplace large enough to stand in crackled with warmth. Books lined the walls, thousands of them, covering every subject imaginable. But what struck her most was how lived in it felt. Unlike the formal corridors and staterooms they'd passed, this space was personal. A half-finished chess game sat on a side table. Papers covered a massive desk, many with notes scrawled in margins. A worn armchair sat by the fire, a blanket draped across it like someone had just been reading there. This wasn't the Alpha King's quarters. This was Kale's home. "The Royal Guard has their own wing," Kale explained, releasing her hand to close the door. "But they're close if we need them. This floor is private, my quarters, a few guest rooms, and space for Pack. You'll stay here." "Here?" Elowen squeaked. "In your quarters?" "In the guest room attached to my quarters," he clarified, moving to open a connecting door she hadn't noticed. "But yes, here. Close enough that I can protect you, far enough that you have privacy if you need it." The guest room was smaller but no less beautiful. A bed that was still twice the size of anything she'd ever slept in. More windows. A bathing room that made her eyes widen. There was an actual tub, large enough to swim in, with taps that presumably produced hot water on command. "This is too much," she whispered. "This is the smallest guest room," Kale replied. "And before you argue, remember you're under royal protection now. That means you get royal accommodations. Besides..." He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "I sleep better knowing you're close. The bond is new, still settling. Distance makes it uncomfortable." Elowen had noticed that. Even the few feet between them now made her wolf restless, made her want to move closer. The bond was like an invisible thread, always pulling her toward her pack. Toward Kale. "I'll stay," she said, "but I need to contribute somehow. I can't just live here like a pet. I need a purpose." "You have a purpose," Kale said firmly. "Right now, that purpose is healing, recovering from 14 years of abuse and neglect, learning what it means to be Pack, to be valued, to be safe. That's more than enough for now. But after the trial, we'll figure out what you want to do, what skills you have, what interests you. The Royal Pack serves in many ways. Some are warriors, some are diplomats, some are scholars. Valencia handles intelligence gathering. Lyra does reconnaissance and tracking. Finn works with the younger wolves, training the next generation. Everyone has a role that suits their strengths. What if I don't have any strengths?" The question came out smaller than she intended. Kale moved closer, taking both her hands in his. His gold eyes were intense, unwavering. "You survived 14 years of systematic abuse. You maintained your compassion and kindness despite every reason to become bitter and cruel. You saved 16 lives without hesitation. You faced down an Alpha King and a council full of hostile alphas without breaking. Elowen, you have more strength in your little finger than most wolves have in their entire bodies. You just need time to see it yourself." Tears burned her eyes. She blinked them back, refusing to cry again. She'd done enough crying. "Now," Kale said, his tone lightening. "You need food, a bath, and sleep. In that order. When was the last time you had a proper bath?" Elowen thought about the bucket of cold water she'd used to wash with in her cabin. "Define proper." His expression darkened. "Right, that's what I thought. Come on." He led her back to the bathing room and started working the taps. Water gushed out, steaming hot, filling the enormous tub with surprising speed. He added something from a bottle on the edge, soap or oil or something, and the water began to foam, releasing a scent like lavender and mint. "Take as long as you want," he said. "There are towels in the cabinet, robes in the wardrobe. I'll have food sent up. Call if you need anything. I'll hear you through the bond." He left, closing the door behind him, and Elowen was alone for the first time since, she couldn't remember. Since before the storm, certainly, maybe longer. She stripped off the borrowed robe and caught sight of herself in a full-length mirror. The reflection shocked her. She'd known she was thin, but seeing herself clearly, in good light, made the reality brutal. Her ribs showed, her hip bones jutted out, her arms were stick-thin, lacking any real muscle. Bruises in various stages of healing covered her body, some from dragging wolves, some older, much older. This was what 14 years of neglect looked like. This was what Alpha Donovan had done to her. Rage, sudden and fierce, burned through her chest. Not just at Donovan, but at everyone. At Beta Thomas, who'd told her to stay away. At Catherine, who'd laughed. At every wolf who'd walked past her, day after day, and decided she wasn't worth helping. At herself, for believing them when they said she deserved it. Never again, she whispered to her reflection. Never again. She sank into the hot water, and the moan that escaped her was entirely involuntary. It was perfect hot enough to make her skin pink, soft enough to feel like silk. The scent wrapped around her, soothing nerves she hadn't realized were frayed. She dunked her head under, letting the water saturate her hair, wash away days of dirt and dried sweat and fear. When she surfaced, she found soap and shampoo on a shelf within reach. She scrubbed until her skin felt raw, until she could no longer smell the cabin, the storm, the scent of wolves who'd left her to die. She washed her hair 3 times, working out tangles with patient fingers, until it felt clean for the first time in longer than she wanted to admit. She stayed in the water until it began to cool, then reluctantly climbed out. The towels were impossibly soft, thick enough to wrap around herself twice. The robe in the wardrobe was similar, heavy silk in deep blue, embroidered with silver stars. It was too beautiful for someone like her, but Cale had said she belonged here, that she deserved this. Maybe if she wore it long enough, she'd start to believe him. She emerged from the bathing room to find food waiting, a tray laden with roasted meat, fresh bread, cheese, fruit, and some kind of pastry that smelled like heaven. Her stomach growled so loudly she heard Cale laugh through the connecting door. "Eat," he called. "All of it. I can order more if you're still hungry." She ate. Slowly at first, afraid her shrunken stomach would rebel. But the food was so good, so rich and flavorful, that she couldn't stop. She ate until she was actually, genuinely full, a sensation so foreign she almost didn't recognize it. A knock at the main door interrupted her food coma. She heard Cale answer it, heard low voices. Then he appeared in her doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "That was Chancellor Aldrich," he said. "Alpha Donovan has been officially summoned. The trial is set for 6 days from now. He's already responded he'll be here in 4 days, and he's bringing witnesses to refute the charges." Elowen's appetite vanished. "Witnesses? Who?" "Beta Thomas, for one. Catherine. A few others from your pack." Cale's jaw clenched. "They're going to claim you're lying, that you were treated fairly, that the cabin was adequate, that you chose to stay behind during the storm. They're going to make me look like the villain," Elowen said flatly. It's what they'd always done. Twisted the truth until she was the problem, the burden, the wolf who caused trouble just by existing. "Let them try," Cale said, and there was steel in his voice. "We have evidence they can't refute. We have your physical condition, documented by our pack healer. We have testimony from 16 royal guards. We have the remains of your cabin, which anyone can see was unfit for habitation. And most importantly," he moved closer, crouching down so they were eye level, "we have you. Your truth, your story, your courage. They can't twist that, Elowen. Not when you have the full power of the crown behind you. What if the council doesn't believe me?" The fear tasted bitter on her tongue. "What if they side with Donovan? Then they'll learn a very hard lesson about what happens when they cross their king," Cale said quietly. "Because I won't let them hurt you, Elowen. I won't let them dismiss you or diminish you or send you back to that hell. Even if I have to dissolve the council and rule by decree, I will keep you safe. Do you understand? You are pack. You are mine, and I protect what's mine." The possessiveness should have scared her, should have made her want to run, but all she felt was safe, cherished, protected for the first time in her life. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me for doing the bare minimum," he replied. "Thank me after we win this trial and Donovan loses everything. That's when the real victory comes." He stood, heading back to his own room, but he paused in the doorway. "Get some sleep, Elowen. You're exhausted. I'll be right next door if you need anything. And the pack, they're all close. You're not alone anymore." "I know," she said. And she did. Through the bond, she could feel them. Valencia, already asleep in her quarters. Garrett, on patrol. Lyra, reading something in the library. Finn, pestering the kitchen staff for late-night snacks. All of them, present and accounted for. All of them. Hers, her pack, her family. She climbed into the enormous bed, sinking into softness she'd never experienced. The sheets smelled clean, the pillows perfectly firm. Through the windows, she could see stars beginning to emerge as night fell over the capital. 6 days until the trial. 6 days to prepare, to gather her courage, to remember her worth. 6 days until she faced the alpha who'd tried to break her. And this time, she wouldn't be alone. This time, she'd win. Chapter 10. The Trial of Truth. 4 days passed in a blur of preparation and mounting tension. Kale had assembled an entire team to prepare for the trial. A pack healer named Dr. Soren had examined Elowen thoroughly, documenting every sign of malnutrition, every old bruise, every indication of long-term neglect. He'd been kind but clinical, his report reading like an indictment of everything Alpha Donovan had allowed to happen under his watch. Valencia had gathered evidence testimony from outpost soldiers who'd seen Elowen's condition, statements from merchants who'd sold to Silverpine Pack, and noted how the Omega was never provided adequate supplies, even records from pack gatherings where Elowen's absence had been noted and dismissed. And Kale himself had worked with Elowen for hours each day, helping her prepare her testimony, teaching her how to stand before the council, how to speak with confidence, how to hold her ground when Donovan's witnesses tried to tear her apart. "Remember," he told her over and over, "you're not the frightened Omega they left behind. You're Pack now, Royal Pack. You stand before them as an equal, not a subordinate." Now, on the morning of the trial, Elowen stood in front of a mirror while Lyra helped her dress, not in the simple robes she'd been wearing, but in formal attire befitting a member of the Royal Pack, deep blue pants and tunic that matched Kale's colors, with silver embroidery that caught the light. Her hair had been washed and braided in an intricate style that Lyra insisted was traditional for Pack members appearing before the council. "You look fierce," Lyra said, standing back to admire her work. "Like a warrior." "I don't feel like a warrior," Elowen admitted. Her hands were shaking, her stomach churned with anxiety. "I feel like I'm about to throw up." "That's normal," Valencia said from the doorway. She was already dressed in similar formal attire, her auburn hair pulled back in a severe style that made her look even more intimidating. "I threw up before my first council appearance. The key is not letting them see you're nervous. They're going to tear me apart," Elowen whispered. "Only if you let them," Kale said, entering through the connecting door. He was magnificent, in full royal regalia, black and silver, with the crown of stars resting on his dark hair. But his gold eyes were soft as they met hers. "And I won't let that happen. None of us will." Through the bond, Elowen felt the others gathering. Garrett, Finn, and the rest of the royal guard, all dressed formally, all ready to stand with her. Their support flowed through the pack connection like warm honey, steadying her nerves. "It's time," Kale said, offering his hand. She took it, and together they walked through the palace halls toward the council chamber. The corridors were lined with wolves, servants, guards, courtiers, all of them, watching the procession, with expressions ranging from curiosity to support to barely concealed hostility. News of the trial had spread through the capital like wildfire. Everyone knew what was happening today. Everyone had an opinion. The council chamber was enormous, a circular room with tiered seating rising up on all sides, designed so that everyone could see the center floor where the accused and accuser would stand. The council sat in the highest tier, 12 alphas in formal robes, their faces carefully neutral. Below them, hundreds of witnesses and spectators filled the remaining seats. And on the main floor, standing with his beta and 3 other wolves from Silverpine Pack, was Alpha Donovan. Elowen's breath caught. She hadn't seen him in person since before the storm, but he looked exactly as she remembered. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair going silver at the temples and brown eyes that had never held anything but contempt when they looked at her. He wore formal attire that emphasized his size, his dominance, his power. Next to him stood Beta Thomas, smirking, Catherine, beautiful and cold, and 2 other wolves she recognized, pack members who'd never missed an opportunity to remind her of her place. They all turned to look at her as she entered. Well, Donovan said, his voice carrying across the chamber. The little Omega survived after all. How unexpected. Alpha Donovan, Cale said coldly, his tone making several council members flinch. You will address Elowen as Lady Thornheart, or not at all. She is a member of the Royal Pack now, which means she outranks you. Remember that. Donovan's jaw tightened, but he inclined his head stiffly. My apologies, Your Majesty. Lady Thornheart. The title dripped with sarcasm. Chancellor Aldrich stood, calling the chamber to order. We are gathered today to hear charges brought by Alpha King Cale Stormborn against Alpha Donovan of Silverpine Pack. The charges are as follows: abandonment of a pack member, neglect leading to endangerment, and systematic abuse of an Omega under his protection. Alpha Donovan, how do you plead? Not guilty, Donovan said firmly. These charges are baseless and insulting. I have led Silverpine Pack for 20 years with honor and integrity. This Omega, he caught himself. Lady Thornheart was given appropriate accommodations and care. If she chose to isolate herself, that was her decision, not mine. Liar, Elowen whispered. Too quiet for anyone but Cale and the Royal Guard to hear through the bond. Let's test that claim, Cale said aloud. He turned to the council. I called Dr. Soren to present his medical findings. The pack healer stepped forward, a folder of documents in his hands. He was older, gray-haired, with the calm demeanor of someone who'd seen everything. I examined Lady Thornheart 4 days ago. My findings are clear. She shows signs of chronic malnutrition, spanning years, not months. Multiple healed fractures that were never properly set. Vitamin deficiencies consistent with inadequate food supply. Scarring from frostbite that predates the recent storm, indicating she'd suffered from cold exposure before. He held up photographs that made Elowen want to look away. Her own body, documented in brutal detail. Every rib visible, every bruise highlighted, every sign of suffering captured for the council to see. This is not the result of a few days of hardship, Dr. Soren said quietly. This is the result of systemic neglect over many years. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Several council members leaned forward, their expressions troubled. The Omega has always been small, Beta Thomas spoke up. She's naturally thin. That proves nothing. I'm naturally thin too, Lyra said, stepping forward. I was born Omega, just like Lady Thornheart. Would you like to compare our medical records? Because unlike her, I've never shown signs of malnutrition. I've never had fractures from accidents that were really abuse. I've never been left to freeze because my pack decided I wasn't worth saving. You can't compare. Catherine started. Why not? Valencia cut her off. Is it because you know the comparison would damn your Alpha? Because anyone looking at the evidence can see the truth. Alpha Donovan failed in his most basic duty. He allowed a pack member to suffer, to starve, to live in conditions unfit for a prisoner, let alone a wolf under his protection. Enough, Donovan roared, his alpha power flooding the chamber. Several weaker wolves dropped to their knees, forced into submission by the dominance display. Elowen felt it too, the crushing weight of alpha command, the instinct to submit, to cower, to make herself small. For a heartbeat, she was that frightened Omega again, powerless against the pack's cruelty. Then Cale's power surged through their bond, a wall of protection that shielded her from Donovan's dominance. And more than that, it fed her strength, reminded her of who she was now, what she'd become. You dare display dominance in my council chamber? Cale's voice was quiet, but it carried more threat than Donovan's roar. His gold eyes blazed with fury. You dare try to force my pack member into submission. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Kale's power unfolded like dark wings, filling the chamber until even the council members looked uneasy. This was the Alpha King in his full terrifying glory, the predator who ruled predators, the wolf who could crush any challenger without breaking a sweat. "Kneel," Kale commanded, and it wasn't a request. Donovan fought it. Eowyn could see the struggle in his face, the strain in his body as he tried to resist. But Kale's power was absolute, inexorable. Within seconds, Donovan was on his knees, head bowed, every line of his body screaming submission. So were his witnesses, Thomas, Catherine, and the others, all forced down by their king's command. "Remember where you are," Kale said softly. "Remember who you're dealing with. This is not your territory, where you can bully weaker wolves without consequence. This is my domain. And here, you will show respect. To the council. To the process. And especially to the Omega you tried to kill." He released the command, and Donovan struggled to his feet, his face mottled with rage and humiliation. "Now," Kale continued, his tone returning to something approaching normal. "Let's discuss the storm. Chancellor Aldrich, would you present the weather reports?" Aldrich stood, holding up several documents. According to meteorological records, the storm warning was issued 3 days before the blizzard hit. All packs in the Northern Territories were advised to gather their members and ensure adequate shelter. The storm was predicted to be the worst in a century, temperatures low enough to kill within hours, wind speeds capable of destroying buildings, snow accumulation of up to 10 feet in some areas. He looked directly at Donovan. "Alpha Donovan, did you receive these warnings?" "I did," Donovan admitted. "And did you gather your pack?" "I gathered those who mattered, those who contributed, those who deserved protection." The admission hung in the air like a condemnation. "So you admit," Kale said slowly, "that you consciously decided Lady Thornheart did not deserve protection, that you deliberately left her behind, while the rest of your pack sheltered in safety. She chose to stay in her cabin." Catherine spoke up. "We invited her to the pack house. She refused." "That's a lie," Eowyn heard herself say. The words came out stronger than she expected, amplified by the bond, by Kale's power flowing through her. "Beta Thomas specifically told me not to come. He said I'd be a waste of resources, that you didn't have room for dead weight." "Prove it," Thomas sneered. "It's your word against mine, Omega. Who do you think they'll believe?" "They'll believe her," Finn said, stepping forward. "Because we investigated, talked to the pack members who witnessed the conversation, found 3 wolves who heard Beta Thomas tell Lady Thornheart to stay away. Wolves who were so ashamed of their alpha's actions that they've agreed to testify." "Traitors," Donovan snarled. "Conscientious objectors," Garrett corrected. "Wolves who understand that pack law exists for a reason, that alphas who abuse their power deserve to lose it." "Bring forward the witnesses," Aldrich commanded. 3 wolves entered the chamber, 2 women and a man, all looking nervous but determined. Eowyn recognized them from Silverpine, though she'd never spoken to them much. They'd been mid-rank wolves, betas who kept their heads down and followed orders. Until now, one by one, they testified. Confirmed that Thomas had told Eowyn to stay away, described the conditions of her cabin, the holes in the roof, the walls that barely kept out the wind, the minimal supplies she'd been allocated, talked about how they'd wanted to help but had been forbidden by their alpha, threatened with exile if they showed the Omega any kindness. By the time they finished, several council members were openly glaring at Donovan. "Is this true?" Aldrich demanded. "Did you forbid your pack from helping Lady Thornheart?" "She didn't need help," Donovan said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She was Omega. They're naturally resilient. They survive." "I barely survived," Eowyn said, finally finding her voice. She stepped forward, away from Kale's protective presence, and faced the council directly. "For 14 years, I lived in that cabin, alone, cold, hungry. I was given the minimum supplies to keep me alive because pack law required it, but nothing more. No repairs when the roof leaked, no extra food when winter made hunting impossible. No medical care when I was injured. I was invisible, worthless, a burden that Alpha Donovan tolerated only because the law said he had to." Her voice grew stronger with each word, fed by years of suppressed anger and pain. "When the storm came, I wasn't surprised to be left behind. I'd been left behind my whole life. What surprised me was that I survived, that I found wolves who needed my help, and for the first time, I had something to offer. For the first time, I mattered, and those wolves, complete strangers, showed me more care, more respect, more basic decency in 2 days than my own pack showed me in 14 years. She turned to look at Donovan, meeting his eyes without flinching. You tried to kill me. Maybe not with your own hands, but through neglect, through abandonment, through systematic abuse that made my life so unbearable that dying in the storm probably seemed merciful. But I didn't die. I survived. And now I'm going to make sure you never do this to another Omega. Never make another wolf feel like they're disposable. Never get to hide behind your authority while wolves suffer under your watch. Silence. Absolute, ringing silence. Then Counselor Thea stood. I moved to strip Alpha Donovan of his title, effective immediately. The evidence is overwhelming. The testimony is damning. This wolf is unfit to lead. Seconded. Another counselor called. All in favor? Aldrich asked. 12 hands rose. Not one dissenting voice. Alpha Donovan, Aldrich said formally. By unanimous vote of this council, you are hereby stripped of your title and authority. The Silverpine Pack will be placed under interim leadership until a new Alpha can be chosen. You are barred from holding any position of authority within the pack structure, and you will serve 1 year of community service under royal supervision as penance for your crimes. Donovan's face went white, then red, then purple with rage. You can't, she's just an Omega. You're destroying me over an Omega? No, Kale said coldly. We're holding you accountable for your actions, something that should have happened years ago. Be grateful I'm only taking your title. I could take your freedom, your life. But I'm giving you a chance to learn what it means to serve, to be at the bottom of the hierarchy, to understand what you put Lady Thornheart through. Use it wisely. Guards moved forward to escort Donovan from the chamber. He fought them, shouting obscenities, making threats. Beta, Thomas, and Catherine were also removed, their positions revoked, their shame complete. And Elowen stood in the center of the chamber, shaking, barely able to believe it was over. You did it, Lyra whispered through the bond. You won. We won, Elowen corrected, looking at the 15 wolves who surrounded her, who'd fought for her, who'd made her believe she was worth fighting for. Kale stepped forward and pulled her into his arms, right there in front of the council and hundreds of witnesses. The embrace was fierce, protective, possessive. I'm so proud of you, he murmured against her hair. So damn proud. Through their bond, she felt his emotions: pride, yes, but also relief, satisfaction, and something deeper, something that felt suspiciously like love. Your Majesty, Aldrich said, his voice gentle. If I may ask, what will become of Lady Thornheart now? She can't return to Silverpine. She won't, Kale said, not releasing Elowen. She's royal pack. She stays with us. For as long as she wants. And what if she wants forever? Garrett asked, his tone carefully casual. Kale pulled back just enough to look at Elowen, his gold eyes searching hers. Then forever is what she gets. If that's what she wants. Was it what she wanted? Elowen thought about her old life, the cabin that no longer existed, the pack that had never wanted her, the loneliness that had been her constant companion. Then she thought about her new life, the palace full of warmth, the pack that had claimed her as family, the king who looked at her like she was precious. Forever sounds good, she whispered. Kale's smile was radiant. Then forever it is. He kissed her forehead, and the gesture was so tender, so full of promise, that Elowen felt tears slip down her cheeks. But these weren't tears of pain or fear. These were tears of joy. The council erupted in applause, and the royal guard howled their approval. The sound filled the chamber, echoed through the palace, rang out across the capital, and Elowen Thornheart, formerly the weakest Omega in Silverpine Pack, now a full member of the royal pack, stood tall and smiled. She'd saved 15 wolves in a blizzard, and in return, they'd saved her. Epilogue. 1 year later. The coronation ceremony was traditionally held in spring, when the snows melted and the kingdom celebrated renewal. But this year, It had a significance beyond tradition. Elowen stood before the council chamber, now familiar territory, wearing robes of silver and blue. Her hair had grown longer. Her body had filled out with proper nutrition and care. She looked healthy, strong, like someone who belonged in a palace, like someone who belonged next to a king. Elowen Thornhart, Chancellor Aldrich said formally, his voice carrying across the chamber packed with witnesses. You have served this kingdom with honor, courage, and dedication. You have proven yourself worthy of the royal pack 100 times over. And now, your king wishes to bestow upon you the highest honor within his power to grant. Cale stepped forward, a small crown in his hands. Not as elaborate as his own. This one was simpler, more delicate, crafted from silver and set with moonstones. Elowen, he said softly, loud enough for only her to hear. I'm offering you a choice. Be my mate, my queen. Rule beside me, not behind me. Share my life, my throne, my heart. Everything I have, everything I am, it's yours if you want it. And if I say no? She asked, even though they both knew she wouldn't. Then you stay as you are, royal pack. Protected, cherished, free. Nothing changes. I'll still love you, still want you. But the choice has to be yours, Elowen. Always yours. She looked out at the gathered wolves. At Valencia and Garrett and Lyra and Finn and the rest of her pack family. All of them beaming with pride. At the council members who'd grown to respect her over the past year. At the citizens who'd heard her story and made her a symbol of hope for Omegas everywhere. Then she looked at Cale the Alpha King, who'd seen her worth when no one else had, who'd protected her and believed in her and loved her with a fierceness that still took her breath away. Yes, she said clearly. Forever and always, yes. He placed the crown on her head, and the chamber exploded with applause and howls and celebration. Cale pulled her into his arms and kissed her properly this time. Deeply, the kind of kiss that promised forever. When they finally broke apart, Elowen was breathless and laughing. Your Majesty, she said formally, grinning. My queen, he replied, equally formal, equally amused. Then, together, they turned to face their kingdom. Elowen Thornhart had once been the Omega no one wanted. The wolf left to die in a blizzard. The invisible, disposable, worthless creature at the bottom of the hierarchy. Now she was Queen Elowen Stormborn, mate to the Alpha King, voice for the voiceless, champion of the forgotten, and she would make sure that no Omega ever felt as alone as she once had. That was her promise, her purpose, her forever. The weak exist to serve the strong, that's what they'd told her. But she'd learned the truth. The strong exist to protect the weak, to lift them up, to see their worth. And that made all the difference.